and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. We are live on YouTube. I'm Brian Gorman. I will be chairing the meeting. The meeting is video recorded by Westwood Media Center. If anyone else wishes to record the meeting, please identify yourself so the audience is aware. Seeing none. As a friendly reminder, please turn off your cell phone ringers. The meeting will be civil and all people will be treated respectfully. This includes no clapping, booing, or interruptions from the audience. In the event of a disruption, the chair will give a warning the first time, and if it occurs again, the individual will be requested to leave the meeting. The format of the meeting will be when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium to present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments. The board members will ask questions of the applicant. For public hearing items, the public will be given an opportunity to comment. Items that are not a public hearing, the opportunity for public comment will be at the discretion of the board. When it is time for public comment period, the chair will call those wishing to speak to the podium to use the microphone. Please direct all comments and questions through the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. Abby, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes.
Okay. And I just wanted to start the meeting by making a public service note that anybody can sign up for email notifications for the meeting, and that is at the bottom of the agenda. It is www.townhall.westwood.ma.us/mytown/ all forward slashes. So we have a full agenda tonight. We will start with the first item, which is the comprehensive plan review. So I would like to ask the plan committee up to the podium.
Thank you. Ready? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. Is this on?
Yes.
My name is Jack Wigan. I'm the chair of the Westwood Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. As most of you know, back in November of 2018, the Board of Selectmen, along with the Planning Board, appointed 16 members of the community to serve on the steering committee. And our responsibility and goal is to present an update of the 2000 Westwood Comprehensive Plan, and that's what we've been working on since that time. The way we're doing that is that the 16 members of the committee are divided into subcommittees to work on 9 individual elements of the plan. They're subject area elements. And each one of those subcommittees has a member of the planning board as a liaison, so that as we go through our work, the planning board is aware of what we're working on at all times and are able to provide some guidance during that process. Public participation has been an important part of what we've been doing. We've had 5 full committee meetings since last November. All of them have been publicly advertised and open to the public. We've also conducted a survey of residents, and we had a half-day visioning session one Saturday in order to allow the residents and business people of Westwood to participate in this process. Do I have control over the slides, Abby?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. Thanks. So let me drop back for the survey for a moment. It was launched in March and April of 2019. It was done online as well as paper copies, so people who weren't comfortable with computers could also fill in that survey. We got over 800 responses to that, which provided us a great deal of information to help guide the plan. As you can see on the slide, there was a lot of support for pedestrian and walkability improvements that I think we've all heard for a number of years now. More moderately priced housing, more restaurants and dining options in the downtown areas, interest in additional recreational facilities, including an indoor recreation center, and they expressed how much they appreciated the public facilities of the town and the small town character. The visioning session, as I said, was held on Saturday, May 18th at the Thurston Middle School. We had about 60 participants that spent about 4 hours with us going through a series of exercises where we drew out from those who participated their thoughts on what was good about Westwood and what needed improvement. And again, you can see on that slide, did I get that one right? No, I'm going backwards here. Oops. I'm pretty good at this, huh? What the residents valued in the areas for improvement, which improvement, traffic flow, no surprise to anybody. People were interested in maintaining the community character, having more gathering spaces in the downtown areas, and again, more small businesses serving local needs. So what we're doing here, and with the planning board has accommodated us in this regard, is we would like, at this point, while these 9 elements of the plan are in draft form, to become before the planning board in sort of an informal public meeting in order to present the draft where we are at this point in time. So the 9 working groups have been working on this, and each one has produced a draft of their section for review by the planning board at this point. The purpose really is to get the feedback from you in this public forum, and anybody here in the audience is welcome to as well. And then once we get that input, the committees will continue to work on refining these drafts, and we'll be back to you probably in early 2020 to present the next version of the draft. The schedule for doing this is tonight, this introductory piece, and then we would like to present one element of the plan, community facilities, and then you can see the schedule that's on that slide is when we'll be back to do two elements of the plan until we've gotten through that. So before we go any further, let me introduce a couple of people. Steve Olenoff is here. He's the vice chair of the steering committee as well. And Tom Beatty, who is a member of the steering committee who has worked on the public facilities plan, will walk us through the draft of that plan. And who else is here? There's a couple of other members of the steering committee here as well. So we'd be happy to take whatever questions you have, and I hope we have a good discussion. Thank you.
Good evening. As Jack said, my name is Tom Beatty, and I'd like to start by thanking the planning board for, initiating this process and overseeing it. I think it's going to be of great value to the town, and I'm pleased to be able to make, however small, a contribution. So I want to start by acknowledging the members that worked with me on this, Phil Aramo and Trevor Lobenstein, and then Debbie as liaison from the planning board. So they were very helpful. And for this portion of the comprehensive plan, it's the facilities portion, we contacted and worked with 10 town departments. We worked with the department heads to get information from them about their duties and their facilities. And we also met with their governing boards or committees in public session. So this is a process that's been going on for about 10 months. So they supplied the information that you will see tonight. And we also, as Jack mentioned, used the visioning session and the town survey to guide us. Specifically, we wanted to know if the facilities that exist today were adequate, and if they helped department heads to do their job, or if in any way the facilities were not adequate and kind of prevented town employees from doing their job, which is serving the residents of Westwood. As Jack said, this is a draft, so we welcome your comments and suggestions. It's not finished by any means. So we're going to review some of the goals and action statements here and objectives. And I am not going to read these verbatim. I'm going to try to summarize them. I think that would be not in anyone's best interest. And I'll provide some background material where appropriate, and again, your questions are welcome.
And what I would find very helpful is any changes also. So elements, obviously, that you're going to highlight, some of them are consistent with the previous one, but I'd highlight items that are different.
Okay.
Some will be obvious.
So the overall goals and objectives were public facilities that were safe and secure, long-range planning that's consistent with a comprehensive plan, resources that meet the needs and are accessible to everyone, and accessibility is a theme that you'll hear a lot tonight. Technology is also going to be a major factor. 20 years ago, I don't think we were talking too much about technology the way we are today. And I didn't think we'd be on YouTube today. Public facilities, incorporate energy efficiency. That was a big concern of the group as a whole, that whatever we plan needs to be as efficient now as it can be, and also built in a way that can accommodate future changes. So, and I think I'm going to need to get my book because I can't.
And Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, for anyone that came in late, we do have handouts of the drafts up at the front table if anyone's looking for a copy.
So we're starting off with CF1, which is focused on the school department. And as I'm sure many of you know, the school department is in the middle of an intensive planning process right now. They are focusing on their elementary schools. They are working. Okay. They're working with a town-wide committee. It has members of the school committee, the select board, the permanent building committee, et cetera. They're also working with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And the plan is, as I said, to look at their aging elementary schools and to come up with a plan that will allow them to go forward and to provide the educational standards that they don't feel the buildings are meeting now. There will be, side note, there will be a public session tomorrow night at the Thurston School where the school committee, the building committee will give an update on their progress, and I believe there's another one scheduled for November 4th. And the second one deals with the fact that the school department is going to continue to look at its facilities as they go forward, and with special focus on the Thurston Middle School. CF3, Space Needs Assessment at the Westwood Senior Center. Information that we got from the Council on Aging and the Senior Center was that they don't feel they're able to provide the services to the senior population of Westwood with the space that they have. They're keeping statistics, they have some anecdotal information, but this is a case where they need to initiate a planning process. They don't have a formal process in place now. So any decisions that would need to be made about a facility change at the senior center, that's going to be their goal. And they're going to assemble, and it's the recommendation that they assemble a group to do that. And then CF4, we're dealing with the Islington Branch Library, and this will also involve Youth and Family Services. As you know, the Wentworth Hall is going to be moved across the street from its present location. It's going to be expanded. It'll provide space for the Branch Library, for Youth and Family Services, and there'll be meeting room space in the basement. So that is already in progress. And the goal there is basically for them to utilize that space in the best interest of their constituents. And I think that meeting room space will be very valuable to the rest of the town as well. CF5 deals with the town's computer network. So we spoke with the information technology head, Donna McClellan, and there were a number of things that we discussed. They need to upgrade their capacity to 10G. I believe the schools are already functioning at 10G, so that's a long-term goal for them. They have another issue on their plate which will play out next year, and that's their the cable license with Comcast. And there's been a ruling by the FCC that calls into question funding. Now, the terms of the contract that's now in place, Comcast provides the basic network for the town. That's their expense. But the FCC ruling is going to change the definition of what they have to provide and how it's provided. That could cause a serious financial consideration for the town. And I know that the select board and the information technology people in Westcat have already been to the Finance Commission to discuss this. So this is something that we need to keep our eyes on. But it may not be a facility as we typically think of bricks and mortar, but this is really the underpinning of a lot of stuff that gets done in the town. CF6, we're talking about electronic permitting. That's, in place now, but it's going to be developed more fully with the goal of having greater transparency and access to information from the town's website. Public meetings, public projects, CF8, all these are, and CF8 is about possibility of using the Westwood Media Center for recording and televising public board, committee, and commission meetings. And the final one is about the town's website. So I could provide some information on that, but if you wanted a deep dive, that Donna is the tech person to talk to. Okay, the fire station, the main fire station on High Street has some serious issues. It appears, according to the chief, that the building is very small. There's just not enough space, but there are also some serious structural issues. And those have been detailed in some of the reports that we've received that have been done in the last 4 or 5 years. There have been some remedial fixes, but they haven't lasted very long. Again, this is a situation where a comprehensive planning process to address this and the space needs to go forward with wide town representation. And I think that we're well positioned with the chief in charge to get this done. I don't think it's going to be easy, but needs to be addressed. Then we're down to CF13. We're talking about the DPW facilities. There are several issues at the DPW, one of which is they can't store their entire fleet undercover now. Some of the equipment is exposed to the elements, which shortens its lifespan, so the town's got a capital investment in that, and it's really not being utilized the way it should. So something needs to be done to address that, whether it's temporary housing or whether it's something more permanent. And along those lines, the staff facilities at the DPW are not really in great shape. There's that older wooden building that's on the premises. It doesn't have any facilities for the drivers as they do their plowing in all-night snowstorms. There's no place to take a shower. There are no facilities for accommodation of women if women were to be hired. And the structure is just doesn't meet needs today. So that's something that the DPW director has said that he's going to address. They have had some plans and studies done in the past, but again, it's time for an overall look at how to go forward with this. And I might say, as we get into the middle of this, and I think you know this, but it's not the planning committee's job to recommend these. We just put them forward as we're hearing them from the department heads. So this is what they're saying. Let's see. And we're down to CF14, which is prioritize pedestrian infrastructure improvements. So here we're talking about sidewalks and other things that I believe there's a plan in place now that's in the process of being carried out. But this was one thing that we did hear loud and clear in the surveys and the visioning session. Discussion about hiring a recycling coordinator. And again, the DPW mentioned this. The town needs to manage its recycling streams in a more efficient way. I think people are utilizing it, but they're putting things into the stream that shouldn't be there, and that's causing the town some problems. That will probably also come up in the sustainability report that you'll hear in a few weeks. So some of the things that I'm mentioning now will be dealt with in greater detail by other people. But there is overlap, so it doesn't hurt to hear it more than once. Westwood Cemetery looks self-explanatory. CF17 is about accessibility assessment for all municipal facilities. Most of our newer buildings are completely ADA compliant, but a lot of our older buildings are not. And we'll get to that a little bit later on in another point. CF18, Town Hall. And, you know, Brian, you mentioned something that was left over. This is left over from the 2000 plan. So this was mentioned in the 2000 plan, and basically nothing has been done for 20 years to make the building accessible. I have to say that the town employees who work in the building go above and beyond to help town residents who can't get into the building, but it does not meet the letter of the law. And the town is at risk here legally by not providing ADA compliant services. So I think we all understand that making the building fully accessible would be a challenge, but nonetheless, we heard that from the residents. So that needs consideration. CF19, public meeting space accessible for all. And then CF20, we get into the Dedham Westwood Water District. There are a number of points up there. They are in the process of completing their own comprehensive plan this year. I'm not sure what the recent progress on that is, but it should be done by the end of the year, and we hope to add that to your report. I think we also have some background material on the water quality, and that's been provided as well. Uh, 24, incorporating meeting space in any redevelopment or new construction. That's something we think just makes sense, that public meeting space in any town building needs to be something that's addressed in the design phase. I know the new library's got several meeting rooms. They're kind of packed all the time, and I think we're finding out that the need still exceeds what we have to provide. 25, sustainable best practice. Again, this will be dealt with in more detail in that section. You know, to maximize energy efficiency, to use renewable energy, and I think you'll hear more about that later. CF26, this is something that came up through the surveys and the visioning session, the idea for a community garden, which a lot of communities have, and seems to be something that people enjoy doing. It brings members of the community together. Obviously, if we were to do this, it's finding a space for it. That's more important than not. But it seemed like an idea that people liked. Long-term operation and preventive maintenance for all town facilities. I know that there's somebody at the DPW that's their job is to plan for long-term maintenance. But there are a lot of new buildings, and having a different HVAC system in each building and different lighting and how the lighting is controlled gets to be really complicated. It's usually too complicated for the staff in those buildings to fully get their arms around. So the fact that the DPW is beginning to address this is a good thing. But as we go forward and we want to extend the lives of these buildings and not have them cost money that we already, spend in constructing them, this is really an important thing to emphasize. The money that's spent up front, I think you'll get a good payback on that. Overall, the design of new buildings should be compatible with the surrounding buildings, should be energy efficient. We want things to look like they belong in town. We don't want buildings to look like they landed from outer space somewhere. 29, the town did have a long-range financial planning committee, and the select board has decided to shift the authority of that So, we're not second guessing the select board on this, but a lot of the needs that I've discussed so far tonight call for this kind of oversight. And whether it gets done through the select board and what they've set up, or this committee gets reconvened, but it needs to be something that we get some people on and they can provide some structure and guidance for how these things go forward. I think that would be the most efficient way to approach that. Number 30, we're talking about security and safety measures in all of our buildings, particularly the schools. This is probably something we wish that we didn't live in a time where this was necessary to even talk about. But I know a lot of the buildings do have panic buttons and other devices and do have evacuation plans for the staff. But it's something that somebody needs to take an overall look at. And again, it would be more efficient than having each department do their own different thing. Electric vehicles. We have several electric vehicles and charging stations right outside this building, and there's a call for more. And this is, again, something that you'll hear about in the sustainability, but it just seems to make sense that this is where things are headed. And 32, another item that was very popular in the visioning session and the survey is the idea for a new indoor recreation community facility. So our committee did not say what should be in this. That's not our task. But there seemed to be a lot of interest in having a community building that was separate, that could be managed by the recreation department, and that could provide more programs than we have today. So those are the items that we've looked at to date, and I think Jack and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I guess Abby, did you want anything to add before we go into the board? Anything from staff?
No, I mean, I would just recommend maybe the board, if you have any questions, comments, and then open it up to public comments, questions, and public input.
Okay, great. So why don't we start with you, Chris?
In comparing this to the 2000, my first thought was, and this might be a function of 2000 was the first crack at comprehensive plan. There were 13 action items. We're 2.5 times that on this one. And I'm a little concerned about the readability of this and that this is not going to be absorbed by the residents as well. I think it's bullet pointed and it can be very easy to read, but 20 years ago there were 13, now there's 32. I'm concerned about how it's going to be read by the town people and understood.
Right.
And instead of, oh, that's too much. So I'm just wondering, is there a way possibly you could explore about combining?
Exactly.
or-
We've discussed this already, and
Okay.
we realized as we were getting ready for this meeting tonight that there was overlap. There are things that can be made more concise, and that will be part of our goal going forward. But you're right. There's a lot.
And one other thing that I noticed, it was towards the end, one of your CF items indicated purchase. And that, it seems like that could be considered a goal, but more of a directive. And directive of spending money is not really
That's right.
the pursuit of the comprehensive plan. It's where do we want to go as a town? So maybe avoid words like spend money because it's really not the place of the comprehensive plan to say spend money in this area. It's just explore.
Right. No, you're totally correct on that. And we did take out some other ones, and
Okay. Those were just my first two.
thank
thoughts.
you.
I was wondering if, and this might be for a different part of the plan, but what about the idea of developing a town common or a center, like, I know there's town centers on, but creating some sort of facility by yeah, I know that's been an idea that's been batted around a lot, but is that a part of this, or?
It's not anything we heard. It doesn't mean that it's not a good idea, but it didn't come up from the department heads, and I don't think it was, Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, did we see that in the visioning session or not?
We did hear it a little bit, and it's reflected here a little bit in terms of why we're looking at this gathering space, and we were focused here on the indoor and the public meeting space and trying to optimize that. And I think some of that we other sections of the plan might look at, but we could look at in this section as well. Kind of integrate that. I think some other sections of the plan, maybe the town centers section, I think is looking at it. Kind of took that recommendation.
And the other question I had was, so in the school-related ones, that you call out specific schools, but not mentioning the Hanlon, Sheehan, or Deerfield, and so is that kind of, what's the background on that?
Well, I think part of our goal with this is that that's a process that's moving forward, and we didn't want to really speak for the school committee, but those are the schools that they're looking at. And again, you know, it's their information, and they've been very transparent and provided a lot on their website, but those are the schools that they're looking at. And it's my understanding that when working with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, that, it is possible to, get grant funding for combining schools, but I believe there's a limit of 2 schools that they will fund under that scenario. So, there are decisions that are still to be made, but those are the items that are more than likely in play.
All right.
I have a number of questions for you. So I went through the background materials also. This is, I think, an improvement from the last one, so I congratulate the group for doing that. One is I'd like to see a little bit more data when you do talk about some of the data that you used from the survey or from the visioning session. So, for instance, you say public facilities along with community character, traffic were ranked at the top 3 planning areas. So it'd be nice to have, because when the residents read this, they might want a little bit of background. They're not going to go to that survey.
Right.
So number 2, the second paragraph for school facilities, you talk about each of the 3 schools, Deerfield, Hanlon, and Sheehan, as one. And in a way, it ends up being a little bit broad. So if you could itemize out which school has which issues, and some of the items are the same. And I would avoid using some of the language like it's stated here, like nearing the end of their useful life. I would just avoid that type of language. You talk about school projections in paragraph 3. Maybe if you added a little bit of data from that.
Right. We just got those this week, so
Right.
that'll be added.
And we do talk about, I know everybody's talking about the funding project, but it talks about here is going forward with new buildings, but what if the funding is too low? We don't know what that funding is going to look like. So what is the plan for maybe rehabbing? Like, is there one school that's worse off than another? I don't know if you want to get into that type of detail. You talked about on page 3 about the water district, where we talk about encourage water conservation measures in an effort to best manage demand. So what are those efforts being made? Because I don't see a whole lot of effort being done with that besides a couple placards. The trash and recycling, you talk about the recycling contamination. I think that's the same educational type problem. I educate a lot of people on this. I don't know how much they listen to it, but a lot needs to be done with that. And when I read your paragraph, it sounds like this is a big problem, which I'm sure it is, but I don't necessarily know that residents understand that. So now I'm up to fire facilities. In the middle of that paragraph for fire facilities, you talk about the site has limited space or room for expansion to meet current operational needs. So if you just specify what those operational needs are. Now I'm on page 6 of 10. So the Council on Aging, I think similar with Council on Aging and Town Hall, I would like to see a little bit more information as to what occurs at those buildings. Again, it's for a resident to understand the importance of these buildings. Because even you talk about the number of classes, but a lot of these classes are on a weekly basis. It's not monthly. They happen often. And then I'm just into the implementation actions. I think when CF8, where we talk about Westwood Media Center, you do state evaluate the feasibility, but I see the visibility of government and sports and all that is really important. I know a lot of people, it gets many views and people watch it live and on TV. So I would like to see that as almost an implementation. I think that's really important. And that is, those are my comments.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And Deb?
Thank you. You did a really good job on this. I agree with Chris. It would be great to condense it a little bit so it's easier to follow. And also with Brian, as far as the data, for example, the recreation department part of it, like the #1 priority might be 43%, but that could have only been 200 residents. And we weren't afforded the opportunity to do robocalls or have pamphlet inserts, so I know you were limited on what information you got. I did think, though, that as far as the, like the buildings, we should maybe put as an action a 5-year capital improvement plan, and that should be looked at every 5 years, because as I was going through the data, it said that the fire department floor hadn't been maintained in 15 years. I mean, we need to maintain the buildings if we're going to keep putting money, build new ones or add on to them. So that was just something that had come up along the way.
All right.
And I think that was about all my comments for now.
When we, and anyway, thanks for all the work. You guys have done a ton of work here. When we talk about energy efficient, are we looking at alternative energy sources for, to discuss that?
Yes, most certainly. When you hear from the sustainability people, they are strong advocates for that.
Okay, because we haven't done that much in the
Right,
town.
I know. It
Okay.
is, kind of bleeding edge, but there are, and it came out in the surveys too. I mean, it's not just coming from our committee.
Somehow we've been leaving that aside for a while. That was really kind of my, everything else has been somewhat covered. I'd like to hear from the residents.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Bill, I wanted to add on to that because I do notice that when we talk about that, it talks about new projects. But I think within that, you can add on to current buildings when we talk about using cleaner energy, solar panels and such. And I would even call them out if you've done the research on that. So we've finished the panel for the planning board, so I'd like to open it up for the public for any questions or comments. I'd like to limit the time to 2 minutes. We can extend that up. But if anybody has any questions for the committee, they can line up at this time. Okay, seeing none. One person, sure. Yeah, and you just go to the microphone, please.
Ann Berry Goodfellow, 199 Fox Hill Street, co-chairman of the Disability Commission. I would also like to commend Tom on his great work in condensing what was a lengthy comment from the Disability Commission on Town Hall. Town Hall was a number 2 priority in the 2000 plan to improve access. It's, I don't know, 17 or 18 on the community facilities recommendation in this plan, 20 years later. It's a bit of an embarrassment as the chairman of the Disability Commission to have people have Dottie Powers come out to their car so they can take care of their town hall business, because the lifts, which were put in as a gesture of really good faith on the part of the town because we didn't have to do it, are not really that desirable. Some of you maybe remember Dick Stokes, who was a banker, lived in town, used a wheelchair. He was on the Commission on Disability. We scheduled a meeting for downstairs in Town Hall. Dick gamely used the lift to go downstairs. Unfortunately, Dick was a tall man, and he could not clear the ceiling going down the stairs. That lift has no reverse. So Dick had to sit halfway down the stairs on the lift while the fireman came and hand cranked him back up. The Disability Commission never met downstairs after that. I was mortified that we had scheduled a meeting there and subjected Dick to that embarrassment of having to sit on a lift for, I don't even know how long it took, 45 minutes for the fire department to get over there and to crank him back up. Similarly, the lift that goes upstairs is better, but as is pointed out in some of the other documents, you have to transfer from one lift to the other if you want to go up and down. And, you know, some people are nervous about using it, but it's there. And I want to stress that in good faith, the town put these devices in to make up for the fact that this was an old building and didn't have access. But from time and time again, as I mentioned, Dottie has to go outside and help somebody who maybe doesn't want to use the lift or is embarrassed to create a scene because people are not necessarily familiar with how the lift operates, et cetera. I won't go on beyond that. But I do want to stress that, you know, in our community, and a vision for our community, it is participation by all of the members of our community. And if a section of the community can't get where they need to go, it doesn't reflect well on us. And throughout this report, we're stressing, you know, the needs of our citizens as they age. And we have wonderful people in our community who have given of their time and talent for many, many years. And it seems really unfortunate if they're precluded from participation because they can't access one of our main buildings. So, you know,
Thank you
with
very
that
much for
stress,
sharing the story and your.
I want to, the commission did stress with Tom that we think that should be a really high priority in the community. The other comment I make generally is that instead of talking about handicap access or ADA, it would be universal access. So our buildings, our services should be available to any citizen, whatever that means. And for someone who's using a wheelchair or has physical limitations, that might be architectural access. For someone else, it's hearing access otherwise. But we want to be universally accessible to our community. So,
A good
thank
point.
you for your time.
Thank you.
Brian, I had a thought, if I could ask a
Sure, go,
follow-up
Chris.
to the question, or the point brought up. I heard her mention that in 2000, it was number 2 on the list, and now it's 17. I didn't get the impression this was a prioritized list.
No, and it's a draft.
Okay, and
So you're right.
Understood
You're
that.
correct.
But it does bring up a question that it may be interpreted as a prioritized list. And I don't know, it was a thought. If it was interpreted one way by one person, it may be interpreted by many people the same way. I don't know. I know they did it the same way, CF1, CF2 in 2000. Maybe there's a way to make it clear these are not a list of priorities for the town in order.
Right.
This is a vast list, and it's up to the select board and the FinCom to decide where are we jumping into. It was something that jumped to mind when she mentioned that. It went from 2 to 17. So it just might be something to bear in mind, maybe a disclaimer at the beginning of this. I don't know. It's just a thought that others may interpret similarly.
No, good point.
Thank you, Chris. So at this time, I think we can. Anybody else from the public? Oh, sure. You can just go up to the microphone. Good evening.
Good evening, Mary Ellen Washenko, 226 Dover Road. Thank you so much for the comprehensive plan. Thanks for directing it, and it sure is needed. And so we, as residents of Westwood, appreciate all the hard work you did with the team and the group and the sources that you used and the residents and the survey to put it all together. That's number one. Number two, I like it so much, and I see it a bit. My direction would be to the planning board. I have a question maybe. Is this like a wish list? And how do we begin to implement these sections that are in our comprehensive plan? Because everything here has great vision for our community. One area that I'd like to address is traffic. So, as a long-time resident, 40 years in Westwood, I've seen the increase not only of our traffic within our own community, but because every town west of Westwood on 109 has to use 109 and our roads to make sure they can get themselves to Boston and get onto 128. So my question, I don't know if it's for the committee, the comprehensive planning team, or for the planning board. How do we, especially because since we have a few planning projects before the planning board right now for development, how do we take this comprehensive plan and address certain issues like the increase of traffic? And maybe one last piece, I really like preserving our scenic roads. And it's mentioned all over the plan. How wonderful this small town community is, and we like the historic character, the community character, but our traffic is beginning to take over our roads. And that, it concerns me. It concerns me for safety, and it concerns me for utility and purpose. And there's doesn't seem to be any way we can manage the towns who have developed their communities after west of Westwood. I don't know where to take this and how this gets implemented and how we can address it with the planning board and the comprehensive plan.
No, that's a good question. I think what you'll find is within the language of the recommendations, some of the verbiage, like so for instance when we talked about the West Cat media, I think that should be more of an emphasis. You also for traffic, scenic roads, and others. But as far as a plan itself, Abby, when this is not a we must do, it's a vision. But how do we prioritize? How do we make that noted?
Right. Essentially, a comprehensive plan is a long-range planning document. It is a wish list in various subject areas. So right now, the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee is working on compiling all of our various land use aspirations to present those to the planning board, which the planning board will ultimately be asked to adopt. And it will become a long-range land policy document. So it's not a regulatory document. It doesn't set these requirements, but it guides various town departments and various boards, such as the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and various other entities to which directions to focus on. With all this public input, there will also be part of this plan an implementation section that will come later on, and that will assign responsibility for various groups to start working on some of these items.
As far as ranking, I've noticed other towns where there's not a ranking of items.
Right. I'll refer to the committee, but usually these aren't prioritized. But the committee can look at that and maybe add a description that they're not in any kind of priority order. And then we do also have the schedule up. So at their next meeting, you'll hear a little bit more probably from Natural and Cultural Resources and Open Space and Recreation that will talk a little bit more about scenic roads. And then The traffic one is touched on more on the November 19th. You'll hear from the Transportation Subcommittee. Will present their recommendations. And we expect we have handouts tonight. The goal is for that committee to prepare a draft. As we see tonight, there's a first draft. So we'll have that one, it'll be available on the website 1 week prior to the planning board's scheduled meeting.
Does that suit your question? Okay, great, thank you. And any other questions from the public? Okay, seeing none. So there's no continuance. Move to the next agenda item. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much.
For your work. And these committees are certainly looking for input. So if you have any questions or comments, please contact the planning board or them. Okay, next item on the agenda. Item 2, Westwood Estates definitive subdivision, Hedgerow Lane, public hearing, modification request related to timing and construction phasing of the street trees, drainage swales, and sidewalk along the new Hedgerow Lane. If the applicant is here to present.
Can't see that far.
Just came in today.
Westwood Estates is down at the bottom. There's 3 of them, 4 of them.
You have to, no?
Drainage swales.
And if the applicant would like to present, we're on the Hedgerow Lane.
Excuse me?
We're at the, so if you would like to present.
For the record, I'm Peter Zaka.
If you could just stand up at the,
Good evening. For the record, I'm Peter Zaka. I'm an attorney in Dedham. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Spiegel, the trustee of Canton Street Realty Trust. What is also here is Mr. Spiegel and Dave Johnson, who is the project engineer. We're here this evening. I think this has been before you a couple of times, but I guess tonight is officially opened as a public hearing, requesting a modification of the definitive subdivision decision, not necessarily the subdivision itself. I prepared a memo. I have copies if that did not.
It is, we did have it printed out and it is uploaded in their packet this afternoon electronically. I think it's probably the last attachment.
Yeah, I'm looking at it for the first time. We got it tonight in paper.
So the reason I put the memo is just to hopefully make it easier. What we're looking to modify in the decision is the sequencing of the construction within the subdivision. And I'm actually going to start in the back by reminding the board that this subdivision, the security that was put up for this subdivision is in the form of a tri-party agreement with the lender who put up the construction. I only point that out because typically planning boards are concerned that the developer doesn't finish or doesn't do what he says he's going to do, and a covenant of something of that nature, worse than that sometimes a bond, is useless. In this particular case, the lender has all the money, and the money will be there to complete the subdivision as originally approved. Specifically, however, in the decision, I don't know if Steve Olenoff left, but I believe it was some wording that was suggested by him at the time. None of us even, to be honest with you, actually thought about it, where, from a construction perspective, sidewalks, at least to the binder coat, as well as all of the trees, if you will, in front of various lots, from a sequencing standpoint, required to be put in under the way the subdivision decision is written prior to the issuance of occupancy permits, as we read it, for any of the lots. From a practical perspective, that doesn't make much sense to do because there's a lot of construction activity going on the other lots, in which case the new sidewalk you just put in, or at least to the binder coat, and especially the trees, are more likely to be damaged, if not destroyed, by that construction activity. The two paragraphs or two conditions in the decision that's referenced this are paragraphs 4 and 6, and we're asking the board to amend those. 4 just refers to the way I've rewritten it, but 4 refers to the installation of sidewalks. In the rewrite, I then say, refer to, for sequencing, refer to paragraph 6. And paragraph 6 then goes into more the plantings and the trees, and there was a plan already. The beginning of this talks about a plan to be submitted to the tree warden and the town planner. That had already been done. However, I kept that language in there. But from a sequencing perspective, I broke this down, and much of this has already been done. But again, it's in there because it is part of your decision. So I believe that A, B, and C in my memo, which are the trees and plantings along the emergency access road planted prior to a certificate of occupancy for the first dwelling, it's my understanding, and Dave can confirm that further, but that's actually already been done. B is the sidewalk, meaning the binder course, drainage swale, and 18 street trees on the northerly side of the Hedgerow Lane. Again, will be constructed or installed prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. And again, that has been completed already. B talks about the 23 street trees on the southerly side up to the lot line between 8 and 9 to be completed before the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. Again, that has been already completed. D is actually a new paragraph. I believe at one of the prior meetings, Dave Johnson had showed you an additional landscape area that was actually being added on the northerly side of Hedgerow, and the plan, I believe, has already been submitted to the town planner, or has it? No, but that's new. So there'll be additional landscape area added as opposed to trying to remove everything. And then E, F, and G are really the ones that get into the true sequencing, which is the sidewalks, binder course, drainage, swale, and street trees in front of of lots 1 and 5 will be constructed in front of the particular house upon completion of the construction of the dwelling on that lot. And that's basically to address what I said earlier, which is you put them in now and they'll be destroyed during the major construction activity on the lot itself. So as a house gets constructed, the sidewalk and the street trees, as well as the drainage swale, and there's actually a coordination between all of this. The final grades in front of every lot, as well within the whole subdivision, are actually going to be dictated by this country drainage swale. So, and that's really going to be done once the lots are built upon. And then the final one is, just so everybody's not leaving this out, there will actually be a final coat of asphalt on the sidewalks, which will be done when you do the final course on the roadway itself. And again, as I say, it's to modify the sequencing to protect, so that at the end of the day, we have a beautiful subdivision with trees and sidewalks that are good repair, and to not make the applicant, for no really logical reason, to have to put them in and then redo what we anticipate having to redo them itself. Just as an additional factor, it's our understanding, or my understanding, that the gas company won't actually put the laterals in for the individual houses prior to the start of construction. So the gas line that's going to rip up, and if it's going through the sidewalk, it'll end up ripping up the sidewalk anyway. Again, that's just an additional reason why we hope the board would entertain this and find that what we're requesting is logical. Again, I just want to emphasize, we're not looking to modify the subdivision plans. The plans are the plans. That is what's going to be built. And as I started with, I think that the town is protected and we'll end up with a beautiful subdivision. Mr. Spiegel clearly wants a beautiful subdivision due to the fact that as opposed to a covenant or any other type of security, you actually have money in the form of what's being held by the lender And finally, I'd just like to conclude by saying, you know, this is a subdivision. There are many projects that I'm sure this board has approved, which are not really subdivisions, and I've been here at a meeting when I heard a discussion about a developer who walked away without having completed something and left those who had bought into the project sort of bewildered and coming to this board for relief. That can't happen here because, again, in that case, either the developer was gone or whatever had been posted, if it was a bond or whatever, if anything, in that case, was long gone. Again, that goes back to the fact that, A, Mr. Spiegel's going to be here. There was a 10-house subdivision of multi-million-dollar homes, and I can guarantee you that the lender is going to make sure that it gets built and the money would be released only as the actual construction takes place. Thank you. And if you need any specifics in terms of the sequencing or what's going to be built, Mr. Johnson.
Great, thank you. That'd be great. Can you go through the sequencing, Mr. Johnson? So we're specifically speaking to item E, and again, this was just received by the board. Thank you. And if you could go through slowly, because I know that this is on 2 different pages. We can only see lots 1, 2, and 3 from here.
For the record, David Johnson from Norwood Engineering. We're the project engineers on the project. I think Mr. Zaka covered most of the sequencing. In terms of the plans you see in front of you, on page 1, this activity has been completed. The last time we were here, we were talking about doing it. Abby had suggested a completion date of November 15th. The work was done this past week. So from Canton Street into and beyond Lot 1, as you can see there, the sidewalk is in and the street trees have been planted. The country drainage has been completed, including the curbing. On the southerly side, the street tree plantings and curbing actually has gone up to and beyond Lot 9. I think we had talked about coming up to Lot 8 and 9. We've actually gone beyond Lot 9. And I think, Abby, do you have some of the pictures that show the activity to date out there? This was last week. So on the left side, you can see the what's called the invisible curb. It's flush granite curbing that allows the water to run off the road rather than in a catch basin, in a Cape Cod berm type of situation. It overflows into the country drainage swale, which you can see here actually has been sodded, not just seeded. So it's in very good condition. On the right side is looking from within the subdivision out towards Canton Street, and I think you can see the street trees along both sides of hedgerow. On the left side is the country drainage swale under construction. It was the day that we were out there taking the pictures. It was loamed and being prepped for the sod. On the right side, you can see the cut slope that's related to the drainage, and again, the invisible curb and the pea-stone diaphragm that slows the water down and it does some infiltration before it hits the swale. Again, this has all been sodded, and this activity is pretty much complete up to Lot 9 on the southerly side, where there's an existing house. So that sidewalk goes from Canton Street, on that side there is no sidewalk. So the street trees and curbing have done up to beyond Lot 9. On the northerly side, or the right side, going up the street, the sidewalk and curbing and drainage and the curbing have been completed. Did I also send you a copy of the head walls? Oh, yes. Yeah. At each of the crossings of the driveway, the concept of the country drainage is, rather than having a Cape Cod berm or a granite curbing to channelize the water down to a catch basin, with the country drainage, The water is discharged over that granite curb, which when we put the top coat in will be flush with the finished pavement. The water runs across that and down into this swale. At each driveway crossing, there are two 8-inch diameter pipes to get the runoff down to where it's disposed. There is a pitch to this. It's not a flat swale. And at each of the driveways, we have a fieldstone head wall on each side of the driveway to improve the appearance of the subdivision and give it a nice finished look rather than a concrete head wall. So that's where we are. We've done essentially what we said we were going to do at the previous meeting, and there's the pictures of what's been accomplished over the last 2 weeks.
Thank you. Anything additional? Okay. One will the country drainage, will that be sod all the way down? Is that the plan for that? Currently it's,
I believe so.
okay. And then a few questions regarding the sequencing. So if you could pull up the plan itself, where you see lots 1, 2, 3. And then, so if you want to toggle back and forth, so going through a few scenarios. So yeah, so this is a good one. So what happens if lot 4 sells today and you're building a lot?
The way that is presented now is that the sidewalk, the street trees would be planted in front of that house, as shown on the plan, at the time the house is completed to prevent any damage to the trees. And that portion of the sidewalk would be constructed.
And then, so in that situation where lot 4 is sold, so then lot 3 and lot 2 will not have sidewalks constructed.
Correct.
So
Sequencing is that once the house begins construction, the gas company will come in and do the work on getting the gas service to the house.
Yeah.
The house will be built. The street trees, on completion, the street trees will be planted, and the section of sidewalk will be installed. Other than that, we're back to what we're trying to prevent, and that is to put a sidewalk in just to have it torn up with either equipment or the gas company's installation of their.
So then what is your response to like pedestrian safety for lot 4? So lot 4 buys a house, they put a sidewalk in front of their house, and now they're essentially walking in the road. Let's say they have a dog or a child's walking up the street. So like for a bus pickup. So how do you deal with pedestrian safety without a sidewalk in lots 2 and 3 for that situation?
They would use the road, which is a low volume road. It's only a 10-lot subdivision. There are two lots that would be serviced by the existing sidewalk. Lot 1, the sidewalk goes to lot 2. So at the time lot 2 is built on, there would be pedestrian access from lot 2 out to Canton Street.
Okay.
There is no sidewalk proposed on the southerly side. So you basically would be using the street until such time as the sidewalk is built.
Right. Because what has happened in the past, which is one of the reasons why they put this into, that's what one of the board members had said at a previous meeting, is that if the sidewalks don't go in first, then the houses are built, and then sometimes the sidewalks are an oversight, and then you get to that point where people have then landscaped their lawn, and now you have residents that don't want a sidewalk.
Well, that's why
oversight.
We're talking about in the sequencing to put that portion of the sidewalk in as part of the completion of the lot, the street trees and the sidewalk. Once the lot is completed, the final grading will be established along the back of the sidewalk. One of the issues that we have putting a sidewalk in without a plan approved and a a house built is, we're not quite sure what the grade at the back of that sidewalk is going to be until we know what the location and size of the house is. So at the point where the site is finished graded, we'll now have established a grade to tie that sidewalk into.
Yeah. And then so at the last meeting, we had mentioned that the gas company would rip up the sidewalk. So the next day I called up the gas company, and they said on this road that they wouldn't necessarily rip up a sidewalk, and that they could go under. So that's,
I'll let Mr. Spiegel address that. 'cause
yeah, I mean,
you're
I
in
can
contact with-
share with you the contact who I spoke to at the gas company, but they said that they don't have an interest in ripping up sidewalks. It's not standard practice to do that.
So the gentleman at the...
What if you want to just grab the microphone?
The gentleman that I deal with at the gas company, I think his name is Peter Regan.
Yeah.
And they have to affirmatively put their pipes in. They do not go and tunnel. In some states or areas, they tunnel under roads, but that's not how it's done locally.
Okay, so I heard differently. So maybe that's something that we need to clear up
Well,
for this.
Dave Johnson, who's an engineer, has designed hundreds and hundreds of these properties in this area, and I do a lot of commercial work. The gas company does not tunnel. It's theoretically possible to do it, but that's not what they do here.
Okay, they asked for the street name, and I gave them the street name, so that might be something that needs to be followed up. The other item is why couldn't the gas line go up the driveway? So you talk about the gas line ripping up the sidewalk. The logical move would be to go to the driveway where you're not going to be tearing up
My
granite
understanding
curb.
is the gas company determines where the gas line is going to go based upon the house, the location, the style, the configuration. It's not something that is determined by us. And the reason that they want to hold off until there's a foundation in the ground and a house plan in place is they don't want to end up after the fact having to cross a water line, a sewer line to get the gas service into the house.
So maybe that needs to be followed, because that's a key component to this. Because when you first came, the issue was the trees and the sidewalk.
It still is. That's the main.
And
that's the
then-
main.
And then the
issue.
next thing was that the construction trucks would be going over the sidewalk and destroying the sidewalk, which I don't want to have happened. But at that point, I don't know why those trucks wouldn't just go up a driveway at that point. Why would you go over a sidewalk?
Because many of the trucks aren't able to deliver what they have to deliver from just that one location.
So which trucks, which deliveries are you talking about?
Like maybe sheetrock trucks, concrete trucks have to get around to pour the foundations.
Yeah, just when I think about a truck coming onto a site, to
Heavy
go over a
equipment.
sidewalk versus going up a driveway, that doesn't make sense to me.
Certain trucks have to get around the building. And the way they do that is they go on the left side, the right side, but they can't go in and make the turn, go around the building. Concrete trucks have to get in there to pour floors. Large wheelbase
Yeah.
equipment has to get in there. I think
Can I answer?
Sure,
if you
go
don't
ahead.
mind? So typically, what we end up doing is we put the foundation in, and we have no driveway. After the foundation's put in, typically the gas line goes on the opposite side of the house from the driveway, because you don't want to have a gas meter on the car side of your home. So typically, it's on the back side of the home. And that's how we normally do it. So we don't put the driveway, we don't put the binder in on the driveway until the house is up in the air and substantially complete to like 50%.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense to me. I wouldn't put the binder down either. But you and I have different bits of information from the gas company.
Well,
So we need to figure out
Brian, if we happen to have our peer review here, could we hear from him? He's who we hired on our behalf to
No,
explore this.
I'm talking with the developer here.
Okay.
I understand.
So-
There's a question he might be able to answer for us.
What I'm saying is for tonight, for me, I don't want the sidewalks getting ripped up. To me, that's a waste.
Correct.
So when you mentioned that the gas company will not go under a sidewalk, I followed up with the gas company and they said they could. So
Okay.
you spoke with somebody, I spoke with somebody, so we need to find out where the,
In this situation, it's not necessarily just the sidewalk. It's the drainage swale, which your engineer can
Yeah.
explain. So the gas company isn't going to tunnel underneath the drainage swale and go underneath the sidewalk to not disturb. And if ideally, if we knew exactly how every home was going to be done, and we could go and put the gas lines in now, that would be great. But number one, I don't know how the homes are going to be, and number two, the gas company won't do it until the foundation's in place and the house structure is up, so they know where the windows are going to be, so there's not a risk of explosion.
so for me, I need that information.
Okay.
So I'm not going to be able to make a decision tonight, to vote on this tonight, because we have conflicting information.
But
So
your consultant should be able to
the consultant does
clarify.
not work for the gas company. If you can, Phil, you're welcome to speak to this. But we heard two different things. So when you spoke with the gas company, they said that they would cut through the top of the sidewalk,
They would cut the binder.
cut top down.
Correct. But I do not believe, but Phil would be able to answer better. I don't believe that there's any chance that the gas company would go underneath the country swale.
Well, I need to find that out.
Okay. But these engineers have handled it hundreds of times. They're going to know the answer.
But I was told that this is so Phil, speak, please.
So, so we do a lot of, our company does a lot of infrastructure work, and we coordinate with the gas company on a regular basis. And there's a significant amount of back and forth relative to relocating utilities and structures and/or going around. So pipe jacking is a fairly rigorous process, if that's what they're going to do. I don't know that I've seen pipe jacking underneath a sidewalk, because this sidewalk is 8 feet away from
Yeah,
the
it's
road.
a little bit longer, yeah.
So from just a purely economic standpoint, although we don't want to dig up sidewalks, it's a tenth of the time the effort it is to pipe jack. So even though the gas says they can do it, I don't know that they would expend that to do it. So
Do you have any idea what added expense that would be to whoever is hiring the gas company to do this?
I don't know who,
If
I'm not
any.
familiar with who pays for the connection and what the costs are. I'm
So
not familiar.
this is information that I need.
So,
And I also received this information, this letter tonight, so I need to digest this as well. It's dated today, so.
right. So certainly I can understand the idea of safety and a development of this mag. We observe construction similar to this in many towns. And the coordination between different aspects of the infrastructure are important, obviously. And the opportunity to get a project done quickly and expeditiously, for instance, because of the nature of, this is a project that we wanted to use low impact development techniques. We've been promoting that for quite some time. And this is a great opportunity. There's soils. It's an ideal site for this. Unfortunately, because of the you would normally put in all your drainage system in before you put in your binder course and get it all done. In this situation, the uniqueness of it is that your drainage system is actually blocking your access to the lots unless you use the driveways. But the driveways are narrowed for a pedestrian vehicle, not for trailer trucks bringing in lumber or.
But again, some of these items, the trailer trucks have the machine that comes off, and then it brings it up into an area. So these are, when I look at the different reasons for not doing this, because I care about the public safety aspect of it, it doesn't seem to be a problem. As far as like you said the width of the driveway. So it's wide enough for a cement truck to get through.
So I don't know if you saw the head walls. The head walls are in on some of the driveway. Actually, the one that they showed, the picture they showed, was actually hit, is partially damaged because it is a tight fit.
Yeah,
So,
I understand that. So I'm done with my questions at this point. So we need to figure out. I need to know the depths of the tube, the water for the drainage, so that when I talk to the gas company, I can explain to them the situation.
So
I might have to talk to you after the meeting to find out.
okay, so I
Approximately 4 feet below the pavement.
right.
Because it's a 2-foot swale, and it's approximately 2 feet below the street level.
Right, but I don't think the gas company would come through the driveway. They would most likely come straight from, as Mr. Siegel mentioned, it would come from the opposite side of the building, so that it would be the safest place for the meeting.
Yeah, so I'll have a conversation with them.
So,
Thank you.
are there other, so I have a pretty good idea of what's being proposed here. I think you did a good job of describing the construction sequence. So, I don't think I have any further questions, but are there board members or general public? That's public hearing.
I just want to finish with the board so Chris can go. Then we'll go down to Bill and Deb.
I think that this is the third time that this has been brought to this board. Everything to me seems to be a reasonable request. I was on the board when this subdivision was approved, and other members of the board who were on it have acknowledged that this low-impact design or development, we didn't take this into consideration. This board needs to have some flexibility. If we are not flexible with reasonable requests, we're not really doing our job. We're not here to be the authoritative parent and say, you will do exactly what we said, because it's going to put the applicant at risk financially. Any delay beyond tonight is unnecessary. We have all the information we need to render a decision on this particular, what I consider to be a minor modification to this plan. I don't see the significant public safety risk to not having a sidewalk in a subdivision where half the houses don't have a sidewalk anyway in front of theirs. For a temporary period of time, I don't see the risk. If anything, there's an argument to be made that there's a risk to having a sidewalk built, then going across undeveloped lots where trucks will be going across. Someone who walks on a sidewalk assumes it's a safe place to walk. But now you've introduced the possibility of construction vehicles going across that sidewalk. So I don't see that there's a real strong argument about the safety aspect of this particular sidewalk. I think it's been demonstrated by the applicant and our own peer review consultant that this was an unanticipated consequence of the conditions set forth by the board 4 or 5 years ago that I myself was a part of. And I said a couple meetings ago, shame on us for not looking into that more, and shame on the applicant for not understanding the design sequence, the building sequencing to that design that they agreed to. We both screwed up. Now we're trying to fix it. This seems like a reasonable fix to me. I don't understand why we are calling a gas company ourselves to produce anecdotal evidence flying in the face of two hired engineers for us. We're not experts at this. Engineers are. That's why we hired them. So I don't see any reason why we have to delay this particular decision any longer than tonight.
Thank you. I want to make sure I do my homework, Chris. We heard one thing, that they would cut through the sidewalk. I call up the gas
I
company.
knew
and
you
they
called up
said,
the gas company.
I need to finish my statement. I'll let you finish yours.
You said
So
that already.
I want to make sure I do my homework.
It should be done by now. We've all had time to explore this and absorb everything that's been said. The gas thing is only one element of this. There's other things in play, the swale, the sidewalk, the trees, all at risk, and the gas line hookup. There's no reason they can't.
And on
be
top
done
of that,
now.
we received this memorandum at the time of the meeting.
Yeah, and the only
That's
thing
not-
added was the gas line. Everything else has already been laid out multiple times in previous meetings.
Deb, do you have anything to add?
If the homes were not custom-made,
Yes.
would all the gas lines be put in beforehand then, or?
If all the homes were cookie cutter and all identical, if we built all of the homes on the right side of the street where the sidewalk is, put the foundations in, and had the homes up in the air so the gas company knew where the gas meter is going to be, it could be done prior to as outlined.
I see. Okay. I think that one of the big concerns is, I mean, we don't know, as we said before, when the houses will sell. So you might have a sidewalk at house number 4, and then no sidewalks for.
So currently what we've done in the last 3 weeks or period of time, a huge amount of work's been done there. If anybody on the board
It looks
has
beautiful. I've
driven
driven
down.
down there. It looks
So we went from Canton Street, I don't know what percentage, but I would think over 50% of the sidewalk is built and over 50% of the trees are installed. The emergency road, all of the trees are installed there. I would love to have everything 100% if the homes were in place. So it's only my intention or desire to build it as professionally as possible to respect what Westwood deserves.
Thanks, Deb. Bill?
The swells, how deep are those?
Approximately 4 feet below the curb. The swale itself is 24 inches deep, and the swale starts below the below the curb, and it swales down to it. So it's
So it's going to have to, the gas line's going to have to be abnormally low.
It-
Right? They usually don't go that deep, correct?
they normally go a minimum of 24 inches below.
About 2 or 3 feet, and they have to go more than 4 feet here, correct?
Correct.
Or else they'll be showing.
Or it's possible that they could go 3 feet, put their gas line, and then we would go and put the swale, but we can't put the swale prior. We shouldn't put the swale prior to the gas line because it's dangerous.
Okay, I have to look at that.
Am I explaining that properly?
Yeah.
So all the electric lines, all the conduits have already been installed into all the properties. The only lines that cross that haven't been installed are the gas lines.
And just one other question. This is 3 or 4 years old, as Chris has stated, so it's taken us a long time to get here. I wasn't on the board when this first came about, and I'm surprised that this isn't the only project that, Chris has been on the board before, and most of us haven't, but they come back to us. How long do you think before we finish this?
Well, after we got the approvals from the board, it took approximately 10 months before the town gave us street addresses or numbers, so before the building department was allowed to give us a building permit. And the other thing is, the construction of this road was a substantial, your engineers can tell you, a substantial feat.
Okay.
A lot of work.
And you've had the building, so you've had the permits, or you've had the road in for how long
We've
now?
had the road in, I would say, for approximately a year.
About a year.
And right after the road was put in, we went to pull permits, and there was a long delay. As soon as we got our building permit, within 30 days, we had a foundation in the ground and a house up in the air.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to open it up to the public if anybody has any questions or comments. Sure.
Dave Knoll, 485 Canton Street. I'd like to thank the board for having the public hearing. As you know,
You're welcome.
As you know, that was my request from day one, to have the public hearing to make sure it followed 4181T and 81W. To that end, I was also surprised to see, because I checked the website today and saw that Attorney Zaka's memorandum came in today. However, I did read it, and it does have quite a bit of what's been talked about before. And finally, it's in writing. And it's probably not everything that you'd want, but it's probably most of what you'd want, to the point of having a, as Mr. Zaka has explained in Section E, putting the sidewalk in once the house is completed. I think that'll serve as an incentive. Someone buys a house and it has a sidewalk. Someone buys the house next to it, and they're going to want that sidewalk. So it's like no problem at all. I mean, so there's an incentive there that if you do have,
Good point.
if you do have the sidewalk on Lot 4 and 2 and 3 don't, 2 and 3 are going to get that sidewalk. The one thing I would do is, as Attorney Zaka has in his previous points, tied into the occupancy permit. I know it says when construction is completed. I would make it contingent on the occupancy permit, because now you bring in the building inspector to make sure that it's there. And then the final thing is I would add a Section H to that, because as Steve was here last time, he mentioned the time limit. And I think it would be appropriate, it was kind of hinted at here now, I think it would be appropriate to put a time limit on, because, I mean, if all things being equal, if it's going to go through, it'll go through, and time is of the essence. I would say probably put a year on it, because it was approved in November 1st of 2016. If you said November 1st of 2020, kind of tidy it up. And even if you just put the time limit on the northern side lots, because that's the key, where the sidewalk, you want it. So then it would be, once again, there'd be incentive to get those lots sold, get the sidewalk in. Now, yeah, if you happen to sell those other lots on the other side of the street later, it's not as bad. So, I mean, I'm a fair person. I like to try to compromise, and I think most of what's in here is kind of what was talked about in the last two meetings, and now we finally have the public hearing, and now everything can go through and have the force of, I mean, it was kind of ironic, the governor yesterday, in the ruling that came down, said, well, you can do the vaping temporarily, but you're going to have a public hearing to do it, because you have to allow the people to have comment. So those are mine. I know it seems like a long process, but the reason why we had a little delay is because it had to be done through the public hearing. So thank you very much.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Does the applicant want to respond to any of those comments?
Yeah, I like the part where he liked the part that he liked. But just to clarify, and several people have made this point, my memo does, the only thing that's new, I think, in this memo is the one that talks about the additional landscaping that's actually already been in place, but that wasn't in anything else. I essentially took, I think it was the September 12th letter from Dave Johnson. I took Abby's motion or proposed motion that she was preparing, I think, for the last meeting that wasn't a public hearing, and I just figured it was, to me anyway, it was easier because we're asking for a modification, not of a plan, but of the sequencing. So this just says, let's delete 4 and 6 and put new 4 and 6 in. I just thought it was clearer for that. And just so, and everybody's made this point, I think the key to this thing is, as everybody's indicated, is the swale. I mean, I've seen subdivisions where they have put binder coats, put the sidewalks in, and in all honesty, even, I'll call it regular subdivisions, you want to be as careful as you can, but you're not driving every truck. And even on those, we see damage to the sidewalks that have to be replaced. In this particular case, because the grading is dictating where the swale is going, which is in a sense dictating where the sidewalk is going, I think it's even more reasonable and logical that it be delayed. And we're talking 5 houses on one side of the street. I'm a little concerned about, and I would have to talk about putting timing on this because of the fact, the protection you have is, well, it doesn't say it. It is a requirement of a house when it's built to have its sidewalk. Therefore, I don't know how you do it here, but I assume the planning director talks to the building commissioner and nobody issues an occupancy permit because the requirement in the decision now says there will be a sidewalk built in front of that house when the house is constructed. So there's no concern that somebody's going to get away and try to sell a house without a sidewalk because no occupancy permit will issue because it's a condition of your decision should you modify it as requested.
Abby, do we need to make any specific change to have that take effect, or will it just be because of approving the modification?
That's what you're doing tonight, would be to modify the language in the conditions. That's what really brought this forward because the applicant had contacted me over the summer, I think it was maybe in August, that they were nearing completion of the first house and what would they need for sign off. Because when they get an occupancy permit from the building department, I have to sign off and Phil reviews it for compliance with your approval. So that's your plan and your decision. So that's when I had reviewed these conditions with the applicant, and we were looking for more clarification on at what stage these items are completed, because those conditions really referenced when they go in, but it didn't say to what extent and exactly when we get to sign off on it.
So they've laid out a very clear process now for how they're going to build each of these lots, and it's a process that is designed around the low impact development that we want to encourage. There's also a process on our side to ensure that there's no certificate of occupancy. We'll build that into this until the sidewalk is in place. And there's an incentive for people who buy their properties to come here and say, hey, that guy's got a sidewalk. Where's the sidewalk for me? So in my mind, that satisfies my concerns that the reason we had the original sequencing was to ensure that these sidewalks were going to go in, and that, been history of other places, nothing's not getting done. We have a guarantee, $686,895 is being held as a performance guarantee. This revised sequencing is clearly designed to promote the kind of development, low impact development that we want with this newer style of country swale. There's minimal risk of harm to this project by approving this, and there's minimal risk of harm to the abutters, to the community as a whole. So I think that if we find that to be the case, we should approve this. And unless there's any other public commentary, I'd like to make a motion that we...
I'd like to ask one question. The timeline on the bond that we're holding, how much is that, how long is that for?
It doesn't end.
If you don't build your last house for 20 years, we have...
I have money sitting in an account.
You have money sitting in our account, so we never really... So eventually you're going to get that money back.
Yeah. And further, Dave, I have
50 years from
conflicting information. So I need to do research, so
Would the resolution of that
for you to push
information
me to
change your
vote.
decision, though?
No, because I need to find out what they can.
Because
what's-
I've heard a lot of interesting information about how the gas lines are done, but it's not affecting the sequencing. The whole point was to ensure that the sidewalks are put in, and we made the sequencing a certain way, we find out that's not right, so they're changing the sequencing. There is an issue of like, well, how does the gas work? And they're saying that they had to do the sequencing because of the way the gas company is gonna operate, but I mean, I don't see how that would change. We could approve things without knowing the
For me,
microscopic details of how the
For me,
gas
I need
works.
to look into that. And honestly, receiving a memo the night of a meeting, for me, I need time to digest it. We're hearing a lot of information, so just personally, I like to review the finer details, because these are, we're here tonight because somebody wasn't reviewing the finer details.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion that we approve the
Can
modification.
I'd just like to say one thing. Is there a way to move on and make it conditionally that Brian gets the information? Because obviously he's done his research and there is a conflict in what's been presented and what he's heard. So rather than, I mean, does that make sense?
I don't see how that works.
I think though that if you had the same questions, Chris, we'd do the same for you. I just think that there has to be some way that we can resolve this, get him the information that he's looking for.
I'm not sure the gas company would give a definitive answer at this time. Would they provide, an answer at this point? So I don't know that we'd be
I
able
can
to
speak,
get that information.
when I spoke with the gas company, they said, we want gas companies. We will work with individuals to get gas to their houses. So what I didn't have was the specification. So obviously the swale and all that, the steep. So obviously there are issues with that, but I just need to follow up with them to make sure that is fine. I think it looks beautiful. What you've done so far looks really nice. I just need to tie that bow.
Yeah. Mr. Gomes, if I may,
Sure.
just to address, first of all, because it's been said a couple of times, there is nothing new in this memo. In the September 12th letter from David Johnson to the board, these exact same sequencing was put in there. All I did took it and put it in the form of an actual motion. His letter was, we would like to modify it by doing A, B, and C. I just took his exact language, as well as the language that your planner was presenting to you, and put it more in a very specific form of a motion. In other words, the only difference is I say, look at paragraph condition 4 and look at condition 6, and we're going to amend them to say this, and the this is exactly what has already been presented at the last two meetings. The second thing is, I respect what you're saying about getting conflicting information, but at the end of the day, in the memo and in what had been presenting before, that was only one of several factors as to why this request was being made. So even if I assume that the information that they gave you is correct and they're willing to do this boring to get under, I don't think it makes, without due respect, I don't know why that would change the decision as to allow the sequencing, because at the end of the day, the number one reason, we've been stating that from the beginning, is that you really need to, and I'm not a construction guy, so I may say this wrong, but you need to have the house, the foundation in, the lot laid out, so you can then determine the edge of sidewalk and establish the final grades in order to then sequence it to get your swale and get your sidewalk. That's my understanding. In addition to that, I do believe that, as careful as they want to be, some truck sooner or later is going to drive over something if it's in place.
Senator says, why did this come today? Why couldn't this have come a few days ago, that Abby could have notified the board, because every word is important here, for me.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm saying
So
if you compare these words to the September 12th letter that you have, these are the words, and the only thing that was added to this because I thought the board would like to know it, is two things. One is the additional landscaping that's not on the plan, even though I know that was talked about, and it was in David Johnson's letter of September 12th, that was in sort of a paragraph form. I just moved it up to make it part of what now would be condition number 6. And the other thing is, I figured the board would want to know that there would be a final coat of asphalt eventually put on. So those are the only changes. But again, they were in his letter, but they were more in the body, paragraph form. I just moved it into again, I'm not trying to be argumentative with you, but I don't think anything that the gas company is going to say should change the ultimate decision. And with all due respect, I think, and I understand I wasn't here, that there were procedural reasons why this has been the third meeting, first
So
public
the gas
hearing.
company told me, no problem. Now I need to go back to them with the swale information, the 4-foot depth, because I have conflicting, if I vote on this tonight, it's
But if
doing
you-
it with not knowing which bit of information is the truth. So I want to know the truth before I can move forward with a
But
vote.
with all due respect, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, it's a truth on a matter that doesn't really go to the heart of, so, because the setting of the swale and the sidewalk really is dependent on the, I use the word leveling, what do you call it? Not leveling, what's the word I use
Grade.
here? The final grading, excuse me, the grading of the lot. So that is what's dictating this newfangled swale that we're putting in. So if they can go under it or not, it can't be established until we get the foundation in and you grade the lot, then you do the swale correctly. Because I think if you put these things in now, you end up having to redo them anyway because your grading isn't correct. So we're putting in things that we're guessing. We think this is what the grade's going to be. So regardless of whether, and I respect what you're saying, that you got some conflicting information, but at the end of the day, even if they come back and say, well, if he pays us an extra $100,000, we'll do whatever he wants. At the end of the day, we have to grade the lot before you can determine the proper location of the swale, regardless if they're going in it, around it, or over it. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for your opinion.
Mr. Chairman, we didn't quite finish answering Bill's question about the performance guarantee. The planning board is holding that. That's $686,000. That's not released unless you vote to release it. So typically, it'll be released on a partial release basis where the applicant will request it. Phil will do an inspection and provide an updated estimate based on the remaining work, and then you would have to review it and vote to release those funds at your meeting. And then a letter goes to the bank. So the bank does not release any of those funds until we give that updated written request.
So it can be released before it's final, the work is finalized.
They can come and request partial releases, so it can either be partially, yes. Yep.
And I am not comfortable voting with missing information. Are there any more comments from the neighbors?
Yeah.
There's one, two.
You too.
Yeah. My name's John Shang. At 6 Hedgerow. Been through this whole process since the get-go. All right. And the thing is, I'm in support of Mr. Spiegel's proposal. Because I feel that this gentleman, gets the job done. Okay. I don't understand exactly. I've been listening to it. What the problem is, specifically. Okay. From your point of view.
So the problem is,
Yeah.
at the last hearing,
Yeah.
the applicant mentioned that the gas company will cut straight through the sidewalk and essentially destroy the sidewalk.
Right.
I called up the gas company, and they said, we don't want to do that.
I understand.
So those are two very different things.
Right. I think from what I've heard here, that you just didn't give them the proper information to make their decision, what they told you, okay, at least from what I've heard, okay, tonight, okay. I'd like to move this, project forward, okay, and I don't really see the, problem, okay, in the approval of Mr. Spiegel's, proposal, okay, and I can understand what you're saying, that
Yeah,
you
like
have
my
conflicting-
job is to review material
Yeah,
and to make sure that it's thorough.
right. I
So
understand
that's
that.
my job.
Right.
And the decisions that we make last in the town for a long time. So the decision that was made originally with this, they're coming here to fix that. So that was an oversight. So maybe if they took a little bit more time when they were reviewing that plan, they wouldn't have missed that, and we wouldn't be here tonight. So it's about making sure that you do a thorough job. So that's what I try to do every time that I come to this board.
I respect that.
That's my
I
responsibility.
respect that. I kind of disagree with what you're saying, but I do respect what you're saying.
And then we received a letter today which has very specific items on it where they're saying that it's identical to what we reviewed before, but now you have to go back and actually look at that to see, is it the same? So I'm taking somebody's word on that, and during a meeting to review a document that will then be approved and live in perpetuity within the town of Westwood, I want to take the extra time to review that. If I received that before the meeting, it would have probably been taken care of.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. But I like I said, I still support what he's trying to
No,
propose.
understood. He does great work. I was up there. You do awesome work.
'cause I know that whatever he says he's going to do, he's going to do. Okay? And he has proper oversight on everything.
Great. Thank you very much.
Demand for that.
Can I suggest that we just vote and see what happens? As I made a motion to approve this, and I stated some rationale for it, and would anybody second that?
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstained? Abstained.
Abstained.
Abstain.
So we have 3 abstentions to approve. I just want to, from procedurally, so now where do we go from here?
What's the what do we need? Do we need 4 or 3?
You need 3 votes. You need 3 votes for the application.
So our options would be to,
So there's no way to do it conditionally for him to get his information. I mean, would that be fair?
It would be fair.
That way then we don't have to prolong this.
Sure. You have the floor.
So, just so we're clear, to avoid problems in the future, 3 of you abstained. You're not abstaining because there's any conflict of interest or any concern like that you'll never be able to vote on it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Has
You
to do
j-
with since we have conflicting information, which
Okay.
is why I asked if we could do something conditionally.
And I wish I was smart enough to be able to tell you how to do that, but I'm not, unfortunately not at this point in time. Unless, well, as I sit here and think about it, if the developer wants to meet with a gas company, and if have the chairman either there or on a phone and discuss this issue to your satisfaction, then you could contingently vote to approve, I think, based on resolution of this issue of where the gas line should go. I think you were very well intentioned in contacting the gas line, but I just sit here and think about that conversation. You don't know who you were speaking with, do you?
I do.
You do? Okay. And were they,
They replied back, so I have their contact information.
okay, were they engineered, do you know?
It was I would have to look.
Okay, okay. But, so,
Would you
I think that's very sketchy, so I can't recommend you doing that as I sit here and think about it more deeply. But you need 3 votes to pass a resolution. You only have 2. So, Abby, I think they have to continue.
Yes, you would have to either vote or you have to vote to continue the public hearing to a specific date, time, and place. I mean, I would just
We can't
add.
do it conditionally, as he had said, based on, would we
I-
have, would a memo
You need,
suffice or
you,
no?
I mean, we
you
could-
can't condition something that's beyond the applicant's control, or it has to be specific enough to give, so that there's no further decision-making on your part. So you need to have enough information to be able to state that
What I don't want to
condition.
do is add more burden to you. So is there language like that where it's, I mean, you're qualifying burden?
Yeah. I Nora can, no, you're really getting into a gray area. I'm a lawyer, not a magician. So I really can't suggest language that doesn't require some additional action and decision-making.
So just continue the meeting.
Can I ask that the phone call or however it's done, made, has Phil involved in it? I'd like to have engineers in there listening to what's being talked about instead of
I would
just
welcome that.
laypersons trying to figure out exactly what they're talking about.
If I can mention one more thing.
Sure.
If the gas was not an issue, it still isn't feasible. Because if you go and build the sidewalk down the street and you don't know the elevation of the house and you don't know where the house is going to be and you don't know where your driveway is going to be and you go and build your swale, you're going to end up removing rebuilding the swale once you get the foundation in. Engineers can explain. It's going to be a nightmare. You've seen what I've done, and if you watched what happened, it's huge, hundreds and hundreds of tons of stone got put in. That was a huge project, and we went and sodded it only to try to make it as beautiful as possible for all the neighbors and for the town. I don't need to sod it, if you know what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, this is what's best, and that whole project looks fantastic up until where the homes are built. And if this gets approved, it allows me to sell a home and a person can buy it. Today, if somebody comes and wants to buy the home, they can't purchase and close on the home because the planning board can't release the lots. So at the end of the day, I want the project to be built and finished as much as the town does.
Thank you.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, if may, I don't want to play, if I want to make sure I understand the vote, assuming, for the sake of argument, that the gas company says, we'll tunnel, we'll do whatever we want, are we led to believe that then 3 people would vote no on the motion? I mean,
The motion is not to tunnel,
no.
right? No, that's your recommendation is to not tunnel, to wait, do it all in one process. That's your request right now, and that's what the vote was on.
Correct.
2 people said yes, 3 said I need more information.
Right, and the only more information that I understand that people need, other than you may want to spend more time reading my memo, is will the gas company tunnel, right? Okay, if I put it in simple terms. So if the gas company does say yes, we will tunnel, even though, and Mr. Spiegel has said it makes no difference from us if they tunnel or not tunnel because we don't know where to put the swale, but I just want to make sure how we're reading this vote, because if at least one other member says, well, I'd like to get the information, which we'll gladly get you, but it really doesn't make any difference whether or not they will tunnel or not, then that wouldn't, I don't know what that, I'm just really at a loss on the vote.
So if they say no tunnel,
If they say no tunnel, we know there's no issue. If they say.
we don't know that right now,
No,
from the
well,
board's perspective.
I'm making an assumption that if the gas company says we will not tunnel, that at least one member would vote yes on this motion. I'm asking the reverse question. If the gas company does say we will tunnel, and that's a big if, because I'm sure there's a lot of conditions to that, including probably a very large additional pay to somebody. But my question is, and maybe this is not fair question, I'm trying to get a sense from the board. If the gas company says, yes, we will tunnel, then does that mean 3 members of this board, by abstaining, are essentially saying to us, if the gas company says that they will tunnel, we're voting no on the sequencing that you're asking us?
I also want to take time to look at this memo.
No, I understand that. I said that.
And for the question you're asking, I can't answer that question.
So I'll ask you a question. If the gas company says that they will tunnel, does that, you don't want that, you're not, would you change your construction sequence?
No, it would be the exact
It
same.
doesn't change anything. Yeah, it still makes sense to hold off.
So the options, can we continue the meeting and vote in the next meeting?
I think the 3 members that are unable to make a decision right now should be very clear about what you want to see so that you can make a decision. This is your 3rd meeting talking about this. I specifically asked
This
all
is the-
3 of you.
This came
Well, actually,
tonight.
the last meeting,
It wasn't a public hearing,
Right, but you should
but I
have been a public
specifically
hearing.
asked, if this was a public hearing, what new information would you like to have so that you can make a decision? You've had this information September 12th. It's the same material. This memo is just capturing and summarizing what was part of and provided to you in the September 12th memo and plan and reviewed at your last meeting. You've had it for a couple weeks now. To continue a hearing, just to have everyone out again, I mean, your job was to review the material as it came in and make a timely decision.
Abby, this came in tonight. Literally, it was on the bottom of the stack.
Well, that's because it was a second item on the agenda. There was 2 things on top of it.
But it was literally the last piece of paper for me to make a decision on something that I just received that night.
Well, what if someone had come in here tonight and said, you know, I know of this horrible thing that's going on that no one else knew about until now? We would act on that. We would take them at their word and act on that.
Dave, these are words that are meaningful. And so I would have liked to have received this before the meeting.
I understand that the timing, you know, it's surprise.
Chairman?
I would say this is one proposal.
Sure,
of-
you can speak.
I just want to, now that I praised Attorney Zucker, I'm going to point out an inconsistency. On E is the key here, because up until this point, even though this is the official public hearing, I just want to make sure of that as if those other 2 meetings didn't happen, because this is the official meeting on it. But on those previous 2 meetings, if you recall, Lot 5 was the key. They said they weren't going to do anything until Lot 5 was complete. Now, what we've got is when a lot is completed, they'll put the sidewalk and they'll put the trees and the swale in. I think that's a big difference, because that, at least, I mean, it's going to be especially if it's an odd lot, it's going to, I think that's what you really want. You want that. I think that's what I was looking for, but that was the key when they were saying, oh no, we're going to wait till Lot 5. Well, Lot 5 could be done in 2025. And that was the key. This, once a house gets done, depending on occupancy, it gets that sidewalk, the swale, and the trees. So I think that's a big difference. And when Attorney Zucker says I don't want to insult the intelligence of the board, because it's not really the same information. The new information is that now they're going to, it's not contingent on Lot 5. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, I agree. So what can we do here? Can we continue the hearing and vote at the next hearing? I abstained. I mentioned that I needed to.
It makes it easier. I will withdraw my memo. You can look at the September 12th letter from Mr. Johnson, and you can look at the information that Abby had presented, because with all due respect to your last speaker, the memo from Mr. Johnson said, allow installation of approved sidewalk trees for approximately, and it gives the stations, to occur at the time the 5 house lots on the northerly side of Hedge Road are complete and the country drainage swale is constructed. No. At the time, to occur at the time the 5 houses on the northerly side are complete. And then the same thing with the trees. It had always been the intent that each house, as it's constructed, will get, we're not going to build the 5 houses and then do the sidewalks at that time. That's even, I think, worse than we're proposing. We're proposing each lot gets built upon and the sidewalk gets built in conjunction with the house. Otherwise, you can't get your occupancy permit for that house. I think what we're, if in fact your interpretation is correct of what was indicated prior, which I don't believe it was the case, what we're proposing is even a better sequencing because the sidewalks are being built as the houses are being built on each lot, which was always the intent.
Thank you. So, procedurally, when do we revote on this? How do we revote on it? Since it
You
was-
can either vote now, or you have to vote to continue the hearing to a specific date, time, and place, and make that announcement.
And then we can vote at that date, time, and place.
Yes.
I would like that. So how much, what, can we do it at the next meeting?
No, it isn't, this is the public hearing. You can continue. I mean, you have a lot of agenda items on November 5th. November 5th is your next
I think that
meeting.
we've gone through most of this stuff tonight. So I make a motion that we continue the meeting to November 5th at 7 PM at Carby Street.
Second.
You have to acknowledge my motion. And ask us. So I make a motion that we continue the meeting to
Have a
November
motion
5th.
and a second.
We have
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
No.
No.
Abstain.
All those abstained?
So the motion passes.
The hearing was continued to November 5th at 7 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Reynolds Farm Special Permit Modification Public Hearing. Could the applicant come up and speak? Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Glossa, Glossa Engineering, 46 East Street in East Walpole. So I'm the engineer who designed the Reynolds Farm senior residential development back in 2011. And Ed Musto is here, sitting here to my left. So there's a request for 3 modifications to the plans. So one of them is the drainage revisions. We've asked to revise the drainage revisions between units number 51 and 53 and 61 and 63, which are the last 2 buildings sort of at the top of the project, at the top of the hill. So when we met out there a couple of springs ago, and someone, I'm guessing it was one of the owners or some of the owners, expressed a concern that the grading near Unit 61 was allowing for some of the rain runoff to come precariously close to their basement windows and may have even been entering their basement through those windows. I mean, I never really experienced that, but...
Is that number 11 on this drawing, just to
Yeah,
clarify?
I think so. It's these 2 buildings here, so between 10 and 11. Sorry about that. Yeah, so a lot of these drawings were done, previous to numbers being assigned. So the last two buildings, and it's those two units, 10 and 11. And so it's unit 11 that, had either potentially an issue or had an issue. So when we were out there a couple of springs ago, and I sort of, probably without thinking of it really clearly, is that Ed had installed what we call an area drain, which is just a drain in the grass that with a grate on it, and it discharged through a 4-inch pipe down into the drainage basin. So I just sort of quickly said, yeah, well, the best thing to do here is to take the rooftop drains from those two units, right, and put them into that area drain, so that, because the rooftops make most of the runoff. Grass really, once it's well established, has very little runoff, even in heavy rainstorms. So that was put on the modification plan that you voted on a while back. But when Ed actually went to build it, and he was asking me about the layout of it, and I started thinking about it, and I said, Ed, that's a mistake. Because that area drain, first of all, it only has a 4-inch pipe draining it. And second of all, it has a grate on the top of it. So should the water come faster than anticipated, or should that grate allow silt and sand and grass to get in there and plug that pipe up, that would actually exacerbate the problem rather than cure it, right? And my charge here, the reason they asked me to look into this was to make sure that that wasn't going to happen. So I instructed Ed to connect on Unit 10, connect the downspouts using a 6-inch pipe. So the downspouts all have a 4-inch pipe, but once we have two of them connected, we use a 6-inch pipe. Connect them together and bring them directly down into the above-ground detention basin. And the same with units 11. So the two downspouts, so the 4 downspouts, 2 on 10 and 2 on 11, they connect together, and then there's actually twin 6-inch pipes that lead that down into the above-ground infiltration basin. Now, that does not, is not contrary to the design that I did originally, because my original design just allowed for all of the downspouts from all of the rooftops to discharge either into the above ground or the underground basin. There was the thing with the infiltration basins on each downspout was something that was after the fact and was not part of the design. So I don't think there's any risk in doing it, and to tell you the truth, because I directed Ed to do it, it's already been done. So I'm not forcing you to approve it, I'm just telling you what happened. Because he was out there, he had a contractor, they were willing to stick it into that area drain, but I just think, and I think anybody, if you think about it with a little bit of common sense, that probably was a bad idea on my part. The other request for modification is the size of the trees. So the size of the trees proposed to be planted, at least a number of them, or maybe all of them, are shown as 4-inch caliper. So what Ed's finding out is from Blueview Nursery, is that they can give a 3.5-inch to 3 3/4-inch caliper. So he's asking for a reduction in the size of the caliper of the trees to be planted at the site. And then the final one is that, are you still doing that, the wall?
Well, we're trying to resolve the wall situation with
Okay.
Maji Berkowitz, the unit 43.
Okay. So there's a proposed wall in this location here. So yeah, this actually says 43.
You want to just, when you go.
You
just
might
grab
Need the
mic.
microphone.
Sorry. Once I see it, now I can remember. So there's a proposed wall along the left side of Unit 43, where the ground rises up quite significantly Probably you've all seen that. So we showed a wall back to back with 4 feet in between it. What Ed's finding out is that the block that they want to use, the size of the block and the weight of the block, that the manufacturer says that you need 8 feet in between those 2 walls. So he's asking to have the wall moved slightly towards the unit. And are you going to move the other wall away a little bit? And the other wall away a little bit so that there would be a separation of, so each wall is no more than 4 feet high, and then there'd be a separation of 8 feet between the 2 walls. So those are the 3 requests, and myself or Ed, I guess, could answer any questions that you might have. Oh, sorry, wait, one more thing.
On the backs, Ed Marceau, on the backs of units 41 and 33, there was a Scribner's error on the plan. The details showed a 4-inch pipe going into a 4-inch fitting, but on the plan view, it showed the 4-inch pipe going into a 6-inch fitting.
Yeah, well, all of the downspouts are 4-inch pipes coming out because a gutter can't carry more than what can go through a 4-inch pipe. So the detail on the set of plans always shows a 4-inch pipe and a clean out at each downspout. So, but when there's 2 connected to each other, then we go to a 6-inch pipe. When there's 3 connected, then we go to an 8-inch pipe. So all of the piping has been laid out in that manner.
Thank you. Abby, are there any staff comments?
Yes, I do not support the request for the reduction in the size of the trees. Special permits require the 4-inch caliper, and the planning board has been consistent with that. Your subdivision rules and regulations allow a smaller size, but this is not a subdivision, it's a special permit. So since it's been quite a while since this project was first approved, I think I would recommend keeping that 4-inch caliper size because that's important to the residents that live there and the abutting residents.
Okay, great, thanks.
Ed Musto, whether it's the subdivision rules and regulations, section 5.10.2, which defines street trees, how you measure them. It tells you measure them from level grade, 4 feet in the air. It has to have a 3-inch caliper. That's the dimensional criteria for a street tree. Why should special permit trees require a caliper that's 25% greater than a street tree in a subdivision? I would think they should be the same. They're street trees, whether it's in a subdivision, whether it's in a special permit. A street tree is a street tree. So I would think the criteria should be the same.
Thank you. So starting with you, Chris, do you have any questions or comments?
Oh, does Phil have a report for us?
Phil,
Phil, sorry, do you have any findings on any of these requests?
you provided it to us, but you can certainly go up and summarize.
So in general, we concur with John relative to the changes to the roof drain system. We think that it would significantly decrease the frequency and/or severity of flooding between the 2 buildings. So we have no problem with that. He did have a second item on the list, which was going to change the type of berm that he was proposing on the road. So the berm that is shown on the plan is more like a stand-up berm, but it's made of asphalt. So they're proposing to have a more modified Cape Cod berm, which is much more forgiving when hit by a plow, and probably is going to last longer. So we don't see an issue with that. We think it may be an improvement. The street trees that they asked for were 2.5 to 3.5 caliper, not the whatever 3.5 to 3 3/4 or whatever. So But I'll leave that up to your discretion. And then the terrace wall, the way it's depicted on the plan, it looks different than the other retaining walls. So we'd like to see a detail of that and see how it's going to be constructed, how it's going to look, because that's kind of a sensitive issue relative to the project. But in general, we don't have an issue. I think the only issue would be an access issue around that corner of the building. And if the fire department doesn't have an issue with that, which I believe they don't, then we don't need it. So just a detail, just to make sure that everyone knows what's going to be constructed. There's going to be not going to be any surprises.
So we have no drawings now? We don't have any drawings of that right now, what it looks like?
Oh, so I'm sorry, I forgot about the berm. So, no, there's no berm there now. So the berm that's shown on the plan is what we call a shoe berm. So you've seen those berm machines that they sort of drag along and they put asphalt in there. And, I'm sure there's tons of those or miles of those in Westwood, but they're fine along wider streets where the plows aren't so likely to hit them. The reason I asked for this was because I had met with one of the potential pavers who was going to do the work there, and he asked me about it, and I said, well, what are the options? What can you do? And he said, well, we do what they call a mono berm. So when they're running the paver, right, the 11 or 12 foot wide paver, the shoe is actually off of the end of the paver and the asphalt goes in there. And so it's mono, it's part of the actual asphalt driveway. So from the homeowner's position, I think that would be a better product for them because it's a little bit tight. It's a 20-foot wide, essentially access driveway, and plows are going to be more apt to get close to that edge of that driveway rather than a roadway where they'll stay back 2 or 3 feet when they're plowing. So it's really not a cost issue. That berm, that mono berm, actually has 5-inch reveal. So it tilts up 5 inches, and the shoe berm was 6 inches. So it really doesn't matter in the grading and all. So I'm sorry I forgot about that. And thank you for reminding me, Phil. But that was just, the reason I brought that up was just because the paver thought, when he looked at it, he's like, well, how come you don't have a mono berm? So that's the reason I brought that up.
Thank you. So, Chris?
For the retaining wall, Mr. Musto, is this the lot where we had to do a land swap with a neighbor because the foundation was dug incorrectly? And is that the result of why the spacing is where it is?
During the planning stages here, or the viewing stage here, I think the chairman of the Conservation Commission, Mr. Rogers, suggested 2 walls in that area, as opposed to 1 wall. And I think this is how we came up with the 2-wall system. One lower wall at lot grade, which is about 220, 228, and then to be sequenced by a second wall, which is approximately, the plan showed 4 feet back. And that wall was to have a top elevation, I don't know, 230, 235 maybe. So there's just not enough room between those 2 walls to accommodate the 2 walls.
And how much room from the building or back deck or whatever to the first wall?
Well, the wall in the rear of the house doesn't change at all. That distance stays the same. The wall that's being moved closer to the house, more parallel to the house, I think currently it's 12 feet measured from the corner of the house to the nearest point of the sidewall. I think we're proposing, I think it's 8.5 feet, 8.6 feet to the nearest point of that wall. And at the terminus end of the wall, closest to the street, we were showing 18 feet, and I think we're now going to be showing 15.5 feet. So the wall is 3 feet closer.
And regarding the trees, I believe this decision was 2012, 2011, something like that. Why are we asking to go down in size?
One of the problems is some of the trees don't meet the criteria that are on that plan, the 4-inch caliper requirement.
What do you mean they don't meet the
Yeah,
criteria?
they're not. Depending upon how you measure those trees, the width of the tree, whether it's at the root ball or whether it's 4 feet in the air, is not 4 inches in caliper.
You mean the trees that you've already planted are not
planted,
big enough
yes.
to satisfy what was in the plan?
And when we put them in originally, we were encouraged to put the trees in, get them in fast. I ordered the trees. I did not look at the caliper of the trees that we put in.
Well, I guess they don't grow very fast, right? 'Cause
Well, they're trees. They, I mean.
had a couple of years.
So Abby, is what's proposed to pull those out and replace with 4-inch? Is that what we're talking about, or?
Well, just in Ed's defense, though, the 4-inch trees didn't go in until we modified them. The original plans didn't have 4-inch trees on them. That was a recommendation from the planner, right? No, the original plans
Or do you
had
have something
4-inch?
else?
Yeah.
Please.
The very original ones had 4-inch trees?
The approved plan in 2012 had 4-inch trees for a number of the varieties. Some of the trees, the deciduous trees, are shown at 4-inch caliper. The coniferous trees are shown at the height of planting. In the most cases, they're 7 to 8 foot height. Plant trees have been planted much later than originally intended. When the planning board first approved this in 2012, the requirement for the senior residential development was that the developer leave a 30-foot continuous existing vegetative buffer to provide a buffer between the project and the abutters. The developer asked the planning board to allow him, rather than to leave that buffer, because it would be easier to create the retention basin by clear cutting and then replanting the trees. The developer asked to do that, and the planning board allowed that with the understanding that the trees would be put in the very first phase of the development. That wasn't done. Some trees were brought to the site sometime after the project started in 2012, most of them probably not before 2016. Many of the houses were built well before the trees were even brought on site. Most of the trees that were brought on site were either left on grade or kept in their containers and put into holes in the ground. They were not actually planted until maybe a year or 2 years after they were on the site. Many of them died. Some of the trees did survive. They were well below size, and here, 3 years later, they are still not meeting the 4-inch caliper. The planning board chose 4-inch caliper trees, not just on this development, but on most of the developments that were going in at the time. It's a good practice to put in trees that are healthy enough and strong enough to be maintained. In the case of a special permit project, where this is not a public road, but a private site drive, it was all the more important that we'd have a condominium association that would be responsible for those trees and would then have the cost of replacing them over time if they were not strong enough and healthy enough in the first place. That's why 4-inch trees were selected. So there are 22 varieties of planting materials that have not yet been put in or have been put in and do not meet the criteria. Beta has reviewed them, and they are either dead or dying, undersized, put in the wrong place. There are many different reasons why they're not acceptable. What the developer has not told you is that Blueview Nurseries has given him a quote to put in 18 different varieties. 18 of those 22 plants they will not source according to the plan. So it's not just the sizes that the developer is looking for a change in, it's the variety as well. 18 of the 22 varieties. Now I have that in a quote from Blueview Nurseries, and I have spoken to them. I've also spoken to Mr. Musto about 5 other nurseries, all in New England, that can provide the 4-inch trees in the varieties that are specified. I would recommend that you think about whether the alternate varieties are appropriate, but I'd also recommend that you stick to the minimum 4-inch caliper. I think that's very important. I did send this list to Beta today, or yesterday afternoon, to review the the alternate varieties that are being proposed by Blueview Nurseries, that they are materials that they have on site right in, I believe, in Norton, that they could source for the project. If you're interested in reviewing that list, I can give you that list. If you're not, you can just leave that up to Beta to review and approve alternative varieties. But the plan that's here now, that's before you, the modification plan that Mr. Musto submitted, calls for the same varieties that were in the 2012 plan and that were in the 2019 plan you approved in July. They only call for a reduction in the size. And the reduction in the size on the plan that is before you is down to 2.5 inches from 4 inches. So despite the fact that Blueview Nursery says that they can provide these 3 1/4 inch trees, which is less than 4, that might not sound like a big difference, 1/4 of an inch, but in caliper it is a very big difference and a big difference in the health of the tree. But my point to you is if you approve the plan that's before you, that would allow the developer to put in 2.5 inch trees, and it would only allow them to put in the varieties that are specifically approved here. So if you're interested in working with the developer to do something different, I think that you could allow Beta and Glossa together to approve alternative varieties, but hold to the minimum 4 inch. I wanted to point out a couple of other things because this project seems like something different comes up every day that's not in accordance with the plans that were approved originally and then approved with modifications in July. 2 of the items that recently came up, one of them is the riprap. You may remember some discussion in July about riprap on the side of the infiltration basin, and the idea was that the steepest part of the slope was to be fully riprapped to prevent the need for mowing the grass in a very steep slope. The riprap was put in with a shortness of the distance where it is shown on the plan. Beta believes that distance is maybe about 13 feet short. Some of the condo trust members believe it's closer to 18 feet short. Whatever it is, it's short of what was approved. So that's something that, again, if you approve the plan that's before you now, that shows the riprap the same as it was approved originally, but not as it's been put in place. So the developer may be asking you to reduce that depth of riprap, and if he does, then I would think you'd want to hear from the condo owners about how they feel about that. And then there was another question that recently came up about the treatment of a path along the top of the retention area behind the High Street abutters. There's apparently disagreement about what the material and treatment of that path should be. I believe that I had always understood it to be loamed and seeded, and I believe that's what the condo owners were expecting as well, and the developer thinks otherwise now. So that's something else I think that before we leave here tonight, you should clarify and make sure that whatever plan comes out of this meeting tonight is the final plan. I'd like to remind you that this project has to be completed by November 8th. We are running out of time here. If the developer fails to complete it in accordance with the approved plan by November 8th, then the condo trust receives the settlement amount to take on the project and work on it themselves. So time is absolutely of the essence here, and I encourage you to make sure you don't leave here tonight without a full understanding of what it is you're approving.
And Abby, can we, how are we keeping a list of the decisions so when we go to make a final motion, that we have everything, like some of those that were just stated?
You should be taking action tonight on the request.
Yeah, so I just mean the list of the items.
Um,
So for instance,
Well, we have the 4, but
Yep,
and we have more that Nora just added.
Exactly. I just don't want to lose track of those, because then when we get to the end, we
Yeah.
can just,
I guess I've been, we have them here. We have
Okay.
number 1.
Why
Do
don't
you want me to?
Yeah, so why don't we continue with questions and then just, I guess,
When you get to your decision point,
Okay.
we should be very clear on which ones you're specifying and
Sure.
acting on.
I just want to, can I
Yeah,
just
I'm all
clarify with Nora? So are you saying that the memo that says make the size down to 2.5, but then when you look on the plans, you see that these revised plans contain different varieties than were in the original plan?
No, the opposite.
No, so
I'm trying to see if are you saying there's more changes on the plans than what's been summarized
I'm
here?
saying that the plan that's before you now is the only modification of that plan with respect to the landscaping from the plan you approved in July is to reduce the size of trees from 4 inches to 2.5 inch, but it doesn't change the varieties. And I'm telling you, what the developer actually intends to do is both reduce the size of plantings and change the varieties, but not reduce the size of plantings to 2.5 inch, at least as of this afternoon, the plan was not to reduce them to 2.5 inch. But if you approve a plan that says they can be reduced to 2.5 inches, I think that's what you can expect to happen.
Dave, do you have another question?
What was, sorry. And then you're talking about the, so the wall or the pathway around the riprap and everything. So is that a part of this too, or that's more sort of what's coming in the future? Or what's actually been done already and will?
That's just another example of an issue that comes up. They come up day to day. So we thought we had resolved every change back in July when this came before you. And I'll also point out, it came before the Conservation Commission. Whatever you decide tonight, the Conservation Commission is meeting tomorrow night. If they don't decide the exact same thing, we're in a holding pattern, and time is running out. So as far as that walkway, it's a matter that needs to be settled, a question of what the plan requires the developer to do versus what the developer believes the plan says. I think the ultimate decision is up to the planning board, what the planning board expects to see as the treatment there. It's not on your application. So my point to you was that your application had 4 items on it. There are additional items. One is the species and variety of the landscaping, and then the actual height. Another is the riprap being short of what it's supposed to be, and another is the treatment of that walking path or maintenance path at the top of the basin.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, on that path that Nora is describing, the path is intended to be a maintenance vehicle access path. And there's a block note on the front of that path, and it describes the material as being gravel. That's what my contractor put on the entire length of that path, gravel. Wasn't intended to be a walking path. It's right here. It's intended for maintenance vehicle service and access path.
And what are you reading from?
I'm reading from the plan, Appendix A, Appendix D, Appendix A, the left side, top left side of the plan.
All right, thank you.
As far as the trees that the riprap, that was probably just an oversight. My contractor has no problem going out there and extending that riprap. As you know, when that plan was approved in 2011, that section of the basin did not have riprap on it. It had grass. This was a recommendation, I think, by the chairman of the Concom to put riprap in its place. We put the riprap in its place.
Can I illustrate on the path? We're talking about 2 different things. Here's Appendix A illustration. This is the part of the path that says to put gravel. It's clearly delineated, different than the rest of the path that goes all the way down along the basin. This was the portion of it that the planning board in 2012 and everyone to date has expected would be gravel. I'm sorry about that. So it's only this portion of it at the far right-hand side that was expected to be gravel. The rest of it, my understanding was that it would be loam and seeded. I believe the condo owner's understanding was that it would be loam and seeded. And I also believe the engineer who produced the plan has stated on more than one occasion that that was his intention. So if it is going to be something different, then I believe the developer must ask you to approve something different. And you have to come out of this meeting with that understanding, and then the Conservation Commission has to reach the same understanding.
We're taking the gravel off.
Microphone, please.
It states right here, install maintenance vehicle access path as shown on the approved plan. We put a call for gravel here. Where's the? It's not on here. Where is it? Anyways, it describes this as being gravel. This is the continuation of the path. It was intended to be a service access to the detention basin. This was recommended by the chairman of the Conservation Commission. No one is ever going to go in that basin to do maintenance on that basin. My contractor is now taking off 3 to 4 inches of the gravel, and he's gonna replace it with loam. My point is, it was only intended to be a service access path. It was not intended to be a pedestrian path, a dog walking path. So he asked me what to put there. I told him, put gravel there. Based on this, service access, not walking path. A couple of the unit owners didn't want grass there. A couple of the trustees wanted grass there. So we got caught in this crossfire. My guy's taking it out, taking 4 inches of the gravel out, and we're gonna put loam there and seed it.
Okay, thank you. Deb, do you have any questions or comments?
I'd like to hear from you.
Comments? So we're going to open it up to the residents. So if there's any residents that would like to speak, so you can just grab the microphone and place. And it's 9:45, so I'm going to try to limit the comments. So if you just...
Hi, I'm Janet Baldessari, 31 Reynolds Farmway. So, first of all, it was interesting listening to the hedgerow situation, because although I understand Dave and Chris's attempt to, want to move forward quickly, I certainly understand you wanting to get into the minutia and do due diligence, because this is where we are at, because due diligence wasn't necessarily taken. Not by a planning board, but by many different parties. In terms of the access path, the main thing about the access path, no matter if some owners wanted grass and other people wanted loam or gravel, the thing is, it's not stable. The last rainstorm we had, a river was running through it. I pointed that out to the builder. It's got to be stabilized. So whatever you guys have to do to make that stable, and maybe making it a firm, solid piece of seeded loam would make it more stable. I don't know, but it's not stable. It's going to fall apart. A river ran through it with the last rainstorm. The 4-inch trees, originally I was told by Mr. Musto that there was no nursery in any area around that would sell him for the 4-inch trees. They had to be 3.5 to 3 3/4. I told him if that was in fact the case, he should bring a notarized letter from the nursery that told him that. And we don't have that letter, and suddenly it's not a matter of not having 4-inch trees available. It's more of a matter of why do we need them? They're sidewalk trees. It's a whole different issue. So I'm concerned about that. Also, on behalf of all the trustees and the owners, I just want to express our extreme disappointment in the slow progress of this project. I mean, it's so disheartening how unbelievably slow. Other than today, maybe because we're having a meeting tonight, we haven't seen any activity for the past week and a half. Ghost town. Ghost town. I mean, you would think from the moment this project was approved, there would be dust flying in the air with gusto to get this project done. And there has not been that. So we're very, very disappointed. We don't understand how, in God's name, excuse me, this project can be completed by the deadline of November 8. I mean, November 8 is 2.5 weeks away, and the deadline is there. And are we anxious to grab the escrow money and leave and take this project on our own? No, we're not. We want him to finish it according to the modified plan. We want him to finish it. Our desire is for him to finish it. So we're concerned about the deadline, and it's not anywhere near finished, nowhere near being substantially completed, not even close.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Sure.
Sandy McWhirter, 21 Reynolds Farmway. I think Janet has said it for us all. We all have the very same feeling. So I think she has spoken for us.
Okay, thank you.
Nora, has anyone checked this structural stability that she's referring to? The structural stability that she was.
No, that's not the riprap.
The
We're
catch-
talking
the
about
catch
the
basin.
access path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's structurally.
Is it
sound?
stable?
She said it wasn't stable.
Sorry.
So we did observe it when it was first installed, and we did have discussion with John about what it should be, and so we are both in agreement that it should be loomed and seeded, at least the part that's not delineated on the plan as such. The word there is a dimension there. It says access, but I think that dimension is really just shown to make sure there's nothing planted there, that it's going to be maintained as an ability to get a vehicle in there if needed.
But if it's a path and people were walking through it, have you seen that? Been out there since it was put in?
So I don't know that it's meant to be a path. I mean,
Is that a misuse of the word?
yeah. It's meant to be a maintenance vehicle access path, really. So you can drive down, and if you had to get in to do some maintenance on the basin itself. So that's the purpose of the access.
But wasn't there somewhere in the plan that it was supposed to be checked every 5 years or something? I believe I read that. That it was supposed to be monitored every 5 years just to make sure it was working properly, and yeah.
Yeah. There's a maintenance inspection and maintenance requirements for all the stormwater features on the property. So I'm not familiar exactly with what was in the maintenance agreement, but that sounds typical. You'd have to inspect it yearly, probably.
Right. So no other comments from the public, so I'd offer the opportunity for the applicant to respond to any questions or give any closing remarks.
The path was identified as a maintenance vehicle access path as shown on the approved plan. I told my contractor to put down the gravel because it was shown as a maintenance vehicle access plan. There's another plan here, and it does state 8-foot access. But right here is where it states on the appendix, it defines it as maintenance vehicle access path. Some people felt, well, this should be a pedestrian path, a walking path to take your dogs. We're changing it, okay?
So you're changing it anyway?
Yes,
So
we are,
it's a
Mr.
movement,
Chairman.
he's changing it.
We're
Okay.
changing it. We talked about it today with my contractors. Now, some people think you snap your fingers and everything just happens. I don't have a ton of money. I was locked out of that site for 2 years by the department, okay? Makes it difficult for me to finish the work that I started. I want to finish it. I know some people aren't happy with the progress or the speed at which we're trying to achieve the end, but we're working at it. We've asked for some minor modifications on the trees. Nora mentions trees are dying. There's one tree, I think, that has failed out of the 44 that we planted. You can look at the list, okay? You can see the list that Beta submitted. One tree is dead. A couple of them may be questionable, but one tree is dead.
Okay. And do you have any other final comments?
I don't. I'm all set.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eddie. Sure.
I feel the need to strongly rebut Mr. Musto's statement that he was locked out of the development. It is so far from the truth. He was encouraged on a weekly basis to get back in there and finish the development. We were negotiating with him and the condo owners for a year and a half to reach a settlement. And at every meeting along that year and a half period, we discussed how important it was for Ed to get out there and finish the work. And every meeting, he said he would do it. He was back to this board saying he would be on the site finishing within 30 days, within 5 weeks. It always changed. But every time he'd leave the room or leave our meetings, he would say he was locked out of the work. Never happened. He was always entitled to do the work, always encouraged to do the work, and encouraged to do it quickly.
In April of 2018, I started receiving violations from the Conservation Commission for working on-site without a valid order of conditions, which is as far as you can get from the truth. My permit to work on that site, my order of conditions, was extended by Governor Deval Patrick in 2012. It did not expire until June 18th of 2019. I started getting these violations in April of 2018. I made a choice. I'm not going to get fined for working on site. When I have these violations, these bogus violations, which are subsequently dismissed, I wasn't going to work there until they were dismissed. They didn't get dismissed until January of 2019.
You know, I wanted to just ask a few questions here because I feel like we don't need to relitigate everything that's happened for the last decade. It
Let's
feels
just
like
make sure that Ed is, are you done, Ed? I just want to make sure that you're.
I would say that's a rebuttal to Ms. Lockton stating that I wasn't locked out of the site. Well, if you are getting violations of $300 per day, those are violations. They're legitimate fines, okay? They were dismissed.
The tickets were issued for failure to complete the work in accordance with the special permit and in accordance with the order of conditions. There was also a misunderstanding of the date towards the end of that process. That misunderstanding was immediately cleared up, and Ed appeared before this board, before the Conservation Commission, and at multiple meetings saying he understood he had the right to work and intended to do the work. He just failed to do it repeatedly.
Thank you.
It's 78 violations. 78 at $300 per day. I'm not going to work there.
Okay. All right. So we as a board now let's tidy this up and.
Got one more.
Sure. You can just grab the microphone.
Kathleen McIntyre, 33 Reynolds Farm Way. We have one huge concern looking at the teeth of the winter. If this road is not paved, we have raised sewer coverages, we will not get a contractor to plow our road. We will be isolated. That's a major point. I think you heard the moan about the trees. There are a huge number which are not thriving and are dead. We do not deserve to live in that situation. Thank you.
Concerning that paving, is that one of the top items? I just want to make sure that that doesn't happen to them.
There are many items that remain to be done, including the paving. The reason the settlement agreement had a 3-month time frame was that it would end on November 8th. If Mr. Musto does not have the work completed by his contractors by November 8th, it becomes the ability of the condo trust to hire someone to do the work. They will need to hire someone quickly because paving must be done before December 15th. And I would recommend getting it done in November.
Great. All right, thank you very much. So we as a board, should we go through each item one by one? Because it seems like, or we can maybe group up the downspout.
I think you should probably go through the items.
Okay.
Do you want to, so the first one being.
Sure.
Downspouts on Mike O'Hain, I'm at 41. The downspouts, it's on the order here, for buildings 10 and 11, I guess, or 11 and 12. I mean, everything's in, so I don't know why we got to vote on that. I mean, they dug up, they put the pipes in and everything, so you just have to approve the work he did. There's no other work to be done.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, let's move forward.
Okay. And nothing here, any vote or anything is going to do away with the time frame of this project being done November 8th.
I think that's a.
No changes. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's beyond our scope.
So the first item is the change to the downspouts, so the roof drains that have already been done that we were supporting. So the first one.
Yeah, so that seems like a case that's
Yes.
good.
You want to just,
Make a motion?
I think just make it clear which way you're voting on that one. Make a motion for.
Want to go through each
To
of these?
approve
So I
down.
think
Yeah. I
with
think you
respect
go
to
through
the
each one, right?
yeah, so the drainage, with respect to the drainage change, I move that we approve that part of the modification.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, so that one passes 5-0. So next,
Now the second one, the change in the berm type.
So with respect to the change in berm type, I think it sounds that it will be easier to plow and will be maintained better, so we should also approve that. So that's my motion, that we approve that part of the
we have a
change.
motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion, a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so that passes 5-0. So the next one?
The third one is the request to reduce the size of the caliper of the trees. Just talking
So-
about reducing the size from the 4 down to the 2.5.
So I would move that we would reject that request to change the caliper size of the trees, and that we would require that they be consistent with the original plan in terms of the varieties.
So I have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion, a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? That passes 5. Next one?
We,
You rejected it.
Right.
And the next item is, I guess I have 3 listed here, so the riprap on the path.
Oh, no,
there's
the
the,
terraced wall.
The terrace wall. Yeah.
There is one, yeah.
so that one, there was, Phil, I think in the beta's review, they wanted to see more details about that. But
Right.
Right. So you could have the plan revised to provide the detail.
Okay, but otherwise, I do remember discussing that. I do remember when we were there with the Conservation Commission, we were talking about ways to fix that. So could we make a motion to approve that part, subject to review with Beta to something that's to a acceptable?
Beta and the town planner, or just Beta?
Beta and the town
And
planner.
the town planner, right, working together.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so that passes 5-0.
Okay, the riprap, what was the, so it's interesting. So this is a case where we have a bunch of things that are new, and we need to act on them. So let's clarify what was the issue with the riprap exactly.
Sound like there were
Wasn't
different
long
legs.
enough.
Can you show on the plan where you're discussing where the riprap is?
Yes, so I just want to point out, first of all, the riprap and the path on top of the basin are the same issue. They're shown in the plan one way, but they've been constructed a different way. So as long as the developer states publicly to you, and you restate that the plan as it's shown now is what's expected, then no change is required. So that was more a question of bringing it up. The riprap that's shown on the plan, I don't know if this detail, yes, there's a line right here that says from this side over, it's to be riprap, and from this side over, it's to be natural grass. So the riprap was not put into this point, it was put into somewhere back around here. So as long as the developer makes it clear, he will fix that riprap according to this plan, and as long as he will loam and seed the path, as the 2 engineers agree should be done, then I don't think that's a problem. You don't need to change the plans. But I think you should just confirm that the
So
plan
Ed-
will stay
Ed
as
is
shown.
nodding.
He's changing the, he's removing the gravel from the path. We're using it elsewhere. It's gonna take about 4 inches of gravel off of the path, which is intended to be a service access path. We are taking about 4 inches of gravel off the path. It will be replaced with loam.
Yeah, so Ed has agreed to.
And see,
Yeah. And the riprap,
I haven't heard him
I
say
thought
C.
it was I read a 20 scale with a 30 scale.
And
Okay,
just
that
for,
was
just
my
for
fault.
clarification, you said loam and seed.
Loam and seed,
Got it.
yes. Yeah, he's gonna, well, there's no reason to put the loam down if you're
I hear you. So I think we're done.
One other
They're related.
one other item on the plants. I wanted to give Phil an opportunity to comment on the variety change, so you can actually weigh in on that. So I think we are all in agreement that the height change should not be altered, but there's
But I thought since the 4 didn't change, then we don't, but that's fine.
So if you keep with 4, then the request that was not rightfully before you because it was not submitted by the applicant is from their nursery to allow 18 of the 22 varieties to be replaced with varieties that they have on site. Beta has reviewed that, and if Phil wants to comment.
I thought that was part of our second vote, was to require that they stick to the 4 inches
Yeah.
and the varieties.
His motion said stay with what.
Right.
Right.
Just thought.
Yeah, so I wanted to maybe give you, so we reviewed the requested changes based on, it was your email, right?
Yes.
Email of yesterday, and it outlines a number of substitutions that may be more readily available, might speed up the process. So we had our landscape architect look at that, and he had no problems. The only challenge that he saw was the Canadian hemlock sometimes has some bug issues. So as long as they're healthy, we don't see any issues with substituting for the same caliper trees as was given on this list. So.
I would imagine.
So to clarify, it might be in the interest of time to get the plantings in more quickly to allow Mr. Musto to purchase the plantings from Blueview Nursery, where he has established a relationship, and get all except for the trees that have to be over 4 inch that they cannot source. I gave Ed a list of 5 nurseries that can source the 4 inch trees. But if you could allow the alternate species as approved by Beta, then you don't have to go through every species tonight, but Beta can look at them individually and say yes or no to the plant list.
Dense here, but are you saying the other trees that aren't 4 inches, that it's okay to do that, or is this will help?
Even the 4 inch ones. So I can I have that list? Just this one. All right. So if I could, I don't want to take the time, but I'll go very quickly and read to you what's required versus.
Should I modify my motion, which was to require the same.
The same variety. That was your motion. So I think that it would be better to say that you will require the height of the trees to be as shown on the plan, but will allow Beta to approve substitute varieties. And I can just give you a couple of examples rather than read through all 18. The plan requires sugar maple trees. There are 6 that have yet to be planted. Blueview Nursery can acquire 3 Armstrong maples and 4 assorted red or sugar maples. They can't get them all as sugar maples. There are red spire pears that are required, 4 of those. Blueview Nurseries can get 4 Cleveland Select pears instead. So there are changes like that.
This needs to get approved by Concom tomorrow also.
It does. So that's why what I would like you to do, rather than approve the exact list, I would like you to allow Beta to approve changes that are appropriate to the variety and species of the plantings, but not to the size.
I will make a motion to modify the original motion to allow, in consultation with Beta, to choose varieties that meet the requirements of the caliper.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? It's 5-0. I believe we're done. Thank you. Thank you, Eddie.
Close the hearing. Close the hearing.
I make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second. We
Second.
have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 5-0. All right, next on the agenda.
I'll make a motion.
We can do stuff.
We can run through this quick. The CBA applications. You want to do the C?
Yeah, can you
Yeah, just next meeting. So we just close the meeting?
I'll just update you quickly on what was submitted.
Sure. So thank you all for coming. So next on the agenda is other business. So Abby, you have some items to share?
We do, You did, after your last meeting, you submitted a memo to the ZBA that you'll need time to review the affordable housing requirement proposal from Fox Hill Village. Late last week, they did submit to the,
I'm sorry, no. Folks, I'm sorry, can you take it outside? We're trying to, we have more business to discuss.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can't hear you, sorry, with the talking.
at your last meeting, you submitted a memo to the ZBA that you need more time to review their affordability requirement proposal for Fox Hill Village. So at last week's ZBA, they did continue their hearing without discussion to November 20th. Late last week, they submitted a proposal from a group home, Till, a group home, or their request was Fox Hill Village owns another property on High Street, 230 High Street, and their proposal is to have at least a 5-bedroom group home at 230
What was the
High
requirement
Street.
from the approval?
Where was
Based on
it?
the application, is it 5?
4 affordable units are
So we
required.
get one additional? That'd be great, yeah, awesome.
So I did provide it, we sent it to Housing Partnership and the Housing Authority. I know the Housing Authority is going to try to review it at their meeting next week so that they can give you a recommendation. So if you'd like, a group home proposal does require a public hearing. So I'm thinking if you have any initial thoughts right now, and then on your November 5th meeting, if you could review it and we could provide comments after your November 5th meeting, so we can provide a formal recommendation at the zoning board's November 20th meeting. You also have a meeting on November 19th, but as soon as you can provide them some kind of guidance, I think that would be better. One option for a group home, if you are in support of that, you would want to suggest or note that that proposed use does require it's a limited site plan review, a limited EIDR, and would be subject to its own separate public hearing. But I think the applicant was hoping to get initial input from you, the Housing Partnership, and the Housing Authority before they filed that application completely.
So like a level of interest, is that what they're interested in, or are they looking for more review of the site itself?
You would need, when the 230 High Street group home is proposed, you would need a site plan, and you'd be reviewing the proposed single-family home in for compliance, but with dimensional setbacks. But I think right now there are, if you're totally against it, or if you don't agree with it, or if you support it, they're looking for that feedback now so that they have that going to the Zoning Board of Appeals on November 20th. So if you want to think about it into your November 5th meeting, or if you have any initial thoughts.
Well, I'm not opposed, and it feels though like we've been getting a lot of the solution to the affordable housing is group homes and stuff, always off-site and always and other. There's only been, I guess, the Green Company with the one there. That was a unique combination of things too. So I guess I'd like to see more affordable housing that are like starter homes and families and things like that, I think. But again, I would like to hear what they say, what the Housing Partnership and all has to weigh in on that. So
Has Sarah voiced anything on this issue?
Not yet. She's going to try to schedule a meeting on the Housing Partnership.
I'm very supportive of the group homes.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard, we have heard in the past the need for family housing, but we did hear recently support for group homes.
That's correct. I think there's a severe need for group homes.
I echo that.
yeah, I mean it's a lot of, there's a need for a lot of things. So that's why I'm just curious as to that becomes sort of the default or something. But it's also, this did look more interesting. It's a different type of, like you say, there are many needs to serve, and so this one was uniquely around people with injuries
And the disabilities change too,
Right.
whether it be physical or, emotional, so considering many.
Anything additional?
Nope, that's it right now. We can provide a formal, I could draft a memo, for your next meeting on November 5th that you could provide after your November
That sounds
5th
good.
meeting.
And close the meeting.
Make a motion to close the meeting?
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? 5-0. Closed.